Okay, welcome to the August 13th, 2025 regular meeting of the Conservation Commission. Our chair is going to be a few minutes late, so I'm going to get started. And the first order of business is the approval of the minutes from June 11th, 2025. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes from the June 2025 meeting as is, unless anybody has any edits.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Second from Alice. Any edits or discussion? No? Wow. Impressive. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed?
I think I voted last time, but is it all? I don't know. Do you want?
For today?
We both did last time.
Oh, we both did last time.
You can.
Wait, oh.
You could still,
Oh, I just meant who's voting today.
oh, for today.
Yeah, we both.
I think we're all, until Sam gets here, then you did last time, so
Yeah.
we switch off? Okay, so we'll switch off on Oliver to do it.
Okay.
If that's okay, until she gets here. And then I think we're at full quorum. Full- Say that again? Okay. Yep. So all those in favor of approval of the minutes? We're redoing the vote. So, and opposed and recused.
Great, thanks.
Okay, the next order of business is the wetland conditional use permit application, old business, which is 0 Banfield Road. Anybody here to speak to that?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us back. John Witten. I'm a civil engineer with Haley Ward, and representatives of the applicant are here with me as well if you have questions directly of them. We were last in front of you last month, what turned out to be a workshop. And from the memo, it looks like we did make some good strides in achieving the standards of the CUP. There are a few things that obviously we need to button up, but we do expect to reissue plans on the 27th to hopefully get in with the planning board. And so we're hoping to answer the outstanding items on that updated plan set for that submittal. But I guess I've just go over those. So just in summary, we are, the applicant is proposing a 5-lot residential subdivision on previously undeveloped land. And there is a prime wetland through the middle of the site, and we are not proposing any impacts to that prime wetland or the wetland buffers associated with the prime wetland. There is a non-prime wetland buffer associated with a wetland across the road from across Banfield Road from the site that we do end up impacting. We had originally looked at 2 driveways to serve 3 lots based on site walk with this commission, and looking at the mature trees along Banfield. The applicant decided to reduce that to 1 shared driveway for all 3 lots. So we're looking at an overall impact of less than 4,000 square feet of the wetland buffer. Banfield Road does provide a physical and hydrological barrier between the site and the wetland that buffer is associated with. So there is no there is no physical connection between the wetland and our property, and stormwater runoff does not leave this property and enter into that wetland either. Stormwater comes off the property, flows down Banfield Road toward Peverly Hill Road, and crosses under Peverly Hill Road under an existing culvert crossing. But our impacts are limited to the driveway, the grading of the driveway, and we're proposing a porous surface for the driveway for the areas that are within the wetland buffer. We do have example house locations and extent of the driveway to get to each house, and design for utility connections. Again, minimizing the crossing of the wetland buffer by following the driveway itself with the utilities. We're proposing grading on each site to support collection of stormwater runoff and rain gardens. We will provide actual detailed, we have an average size for rain gardens, but we can get you the actual detailed rain garden size for each home. And that would be on our submittal to the planning board. And we can get bolster up the maintenance plan for the maintenance of the permeable surface to be able to maintain that as permeable surface for its lifetime. And get clarification on the checklist items that were listed. And then we have added to this set of plans, we walked the Banfield Road site a little bit more diligently and did locate the mature trees along Banfield specifically. The area of the driveway will require the removal of 2 of the large trees along Banfield, but the preservation of a dozen more. So we don't feel that that's a big impact to that tree buffer that's along Banfield. And in the memo, it says that we should show exact vegetation to remain and to be removed. The other vegetation in that area is very small trees and shrubs and just what's grown up. So I guess I'm not sure exactly what to show for exact vegetation that's going to be removed. We're showing that removal is going to be limited to just the driveway crossing and the minimum width required for that. And our grading extents are shown on the plan. And our general clearing limits are shown on the plan. And I guess in an effort to better define those grading and clearing limits, I guess I'm looking for direction from you what you would like to see. We can certainly add another line to the plan and a note to say that those clearing limits should be flagged in the field prior to construction. And then I think out of the checklist items that are listed, the 10.1018.40, which is the item in the checklist which talks about permanent marking of the buffer in the field. The applicant would like to have that as an educational piece in their materials that they give to each new buyer, I guess. Have language in the deed about the buffers, the buffer location noted on the subdivision plan, and a lot exhibit in the deed showing that buffer and that it is regulated by the city, and any impacts to that buffer would have to be further permitted. And distribute the city's pamphlet on wetland buffers and what to need to know in a packet for any sale. I think it's important to note that the applicant is proposing to build the buildings and then sell, so they will have control of the contractors and construction of each of the buildings. So they will be in charge of notifying and enforcing the contractors to stay out of the wetland buffers on either side of the property. the real focus on this property started out and remains that to minimize and basically eliminate any impacts to the prime wetland and the wetland buffers that go through the project. This was honestly a secondary thought because the wetland was across the road. We understand the regulations and all of that, and have taken the steps to minimize the impacts as much as possible. So we feel like we're in a good spot to get to the planning board and talk with them about the subdivision regulations. But obviously, we have to get through this process first. So I know that was a lot of like jumping around on the memo. I hope that made sense, and I would turn it over to you for any questions or advice.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners?
I'm thinking about the stormwater flow and just noting that it sounds like what I hear you saying is that stormwater is not going to cross the road into the wetland across the road, but instead it's going to flow down the road under the culvert and then essentially into another prime wetland that's right into Sagamore Creek there. So just to acknowledge that like any runoff that's leaving that property is actually ending up in a pretty valuable wetland resource. And then I know you don't yet have the detail for the rain gardens, but maybe you could just talk about how you imagine them functioning, like what percentage of the runoff are they going to be designed to capture and located in order to capture? And I think I see them on the map, but it wouldn't hurt if you wouldn't mind just like at least giving us the verbal explanation of.
Yeah, so they're located so that they will get the house runoff and as much of the driveway as we can get, and we would just locate them such that we meet the stormwater regulations that are within the subdivision ordinance. So we would have those sized for, I believe it's 95% of the impervious area has to be treated. So we'd make sure that 95% of the impervious area is treated with those rain gardens, and then obviously almost half the driveway is a permeable surface. So that's a self-treating device. So
the houses will be guttered such that they will sort of move the flow to that rain garden.
Right.
Is that kind of the vision?
Right. We'll direct the house flow to the rain gardens through gutters and any shallow swale situation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? I just had a follow-up on that. Is that in the plans? The calculations and everything?
No, we wanted to be able to get to the point of a realistic layout and everything before we detailed out the calculations. But we will get through that and have that as part of our subdivision application to the planning board.
For the planning board, yeah. So, and then is there a cross-section kind of with the rain garden and the, like, I mean, I saw examples, but I didn't see what you said you were going to exactly do with that rain garden as far as
So
the
the
plans?
rain garden is a typical BMP, so it'd have a filter layer, a small storage layer, and
Or is it the other way around?
and the crushed stone outlet layer
'Cause
on the
it's other
bottom.
way
So
around.
it would
It's the other side of the.
have that same cross-section
But there's no land here.
for each rain garden. They just
I'm wondering if that's.
would honestly be a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller depending on how much impervious area that we're trying to capture for each one.
Okay.
And honestly, the houses will be pretty much the same size, so that they'll be very equal in size realistically. So,
Why they're here.
So that, so the level of, like the outlet and things like that,
Thank you.
you're going to follow a certain, like, plan on that and everything?
yes, yeah.
So it's a little
Yeah, it's,
kind of backwards for us.
okay.
Normally, we would know that.
It's basically a 3.5 to 4 foot section, so that we just have to have an outlet that's 4 feet below the surface of the rain garden.
And then along with that, planting plan, did you mention that in your list?
No, I just mentioned that I guess I was wondering what the commission was wanting to see for exact vegetation to remain and be removed. The applicants are willing to treat the buffer area, so that the area between the driveway and Banfield Road as just a meadow, natural growth area. And we would just be removing some existing vegetation for the driveway cut itself.
Which includes two mature trees, and then whatever else we kind of advise you on as far as your limitation for what you're
Well,
gonna cut.
I guess, I don't know if you want me to count the saplings and the various brush that's gonna be removed in this, 16-foot wide swath.
Yeah, I don't know what the other commissioners want to do. Would definitely at the minimum the area, but we don't know exactly what's there either, so it's hard to say. But did you want to
Okay.
speak to this at all?
May I? Sure. My name's Alex Monastero with Trimberg Builders. I just wanted to talk a little bit of big picture about how we build and what this will look like that I think will help answer some of these questions. So we are both the developer and the builder. So any clearing limits or things like that, we are going to personally adhere to as we go through the process. And so all of these things that you guys are suggesting that we incorporate, we will see through until the end. And so it's not going to have a transfer of ownership where some of these things could be lost in the weeds. And in the big picture, we've really tried hard to protect the wetland buffer for the prime wetland in the back of this site that has been previously undisturbed. The wetland buffer for the wetland across the street, that Banfield Road goes right through. We tried to minimize as much as possible. As you all know, we came in, we had multiple driveway curb cuts, we had multiple utility connection points, and in hearing your advice, we did our best to minimize that as much as possible. So within reason, that's our goal here. That's what we're trying to do. In terms of the clearing limit, we are going to have to put a driveway in, and we're going to have to grade that driveway and connect utilities there. And so as we go through the full design process of the planning board, that'll be fully defined. If there are some parameters that you'd like us to consider in planting plans on the lots or in the design for the drainage basins, we'd certainly be happy to take that advice under advisement as we go through the full design process. So I think what we'd like from you is to hear you say, yes, obviously we want you to minimize as much as possible the area that gets disturbed, where you cut the driveway in on Banfield Road. We've already done that, by taking 3 driveways and turning them just into 1 driveway. But if there are other things that you'd like us to take into consideration as we get into a full design, certainly happy to do that. And then in terms of replanting, we typically do a general house box planting plan that goes to the planning board with shrubs and trees and those sort of things. So if there are things that are important to the Conservation Commission, having trees closer to the buffer, further away from the buffer, those sort of things, we'd be more than happy to incorporate those in the full design of the plans.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions, comments from everybody?
I just had a question about the the permanent buffer markers. Did I hear correct that the applicant is asking to give information about that, but not actually put the permanent markers in? Or are the markers going in and the information will be distributed to buyers?
Yeah, great question. At the last meeting, it was your all's suggestion that we have some informational packets about wetland buffers given to the buyers, and so we're happy to do that. This is field back there where the buffer is, and so in order for us to put placards up, it's pretty disruptive. We have to have the survey crew go out, put a stake in the ground that sticks up out of people's yards. We'd be happy to, accommodate putting some buffer markings on trees where it's available. But what we'd prefer to do in this instance, based on the characteristic of the land, would be to do a really nice informational plan given to each buyer showing where the 100-foot buffer is, put a note in their deed that references that plan so that they know that is in the chain of their title and they know that there is a buffer, and then give them in their package when they, go to contract on their home and when they close on their home, give them a detailed overview of what wetland buffers are. And in fact, the city of Portsmouth has a great one-page flyer about the 100-foot buffer and what its purpose is, so we'd be happy to give that to buyers, both in paper form, and we give them a USB drive with all of their closing documents that lives with them as long as they keep it, so they would have it there as well. So that would be our preference in terms of giving information to the buyers about the buffer.
I think that's excellent that you're going to do those things, but I am firmly in, can I speak directly to the applicant? Yes, right now?
Fine
Yeah.
by me.
Oh, okay. Sorry, for some reason I was like, wait a minute, did we move past
Sometimes
this?
you can't, but yeah.
No,
Or
okay.
you shouldn't.
But like coming from a real estate background, people really don't read documents, no matter how many times you tell them. And I'm so excited that you're going to do that, but we really need the placards to be in place. That's, for me to support this, that's what I would say. And it is a regulation for the city. So I'd take that into consideration.
I would definitely support that too, because it means there's a physical marker there, which is much more relatable than a piece of paper in a drawer in an office lost somewhere.
Sure, understood.
Piggybacking off of that a little bit, but also to some of the things that you spoke to, I appreciate that you're gonna do as minimal impact as possible, but along Lot 3, that wetland buffer in the back of the property looks pretty close to the construction and the development, so when you're designing your planting plan, if you could put some things in there that create sort of a very clear, natural, so that intentionally or not, future home buyers don't mow into that buffer, that would be great. Blueberry bushes or something that would be attractive to homeowners, but just kind of creates a very clear, this is kind of the edge of the lawn area.
Sure. Would the commission be in favor of us marking the 100-foot wetland buffer along the lot line in between each of the lots? And I would also ask if it might be possible to give us some flexibility on how we mark it, i.e. on a tree or on a typical post, or maybe on a rock, if we get some on the site as we're building.
Do we have examples of that on the website, of like what they have looked like?
With your placard, just what the placard would be on. So you guys have a standard placard, and we would appreciate having some flexibility on how we place the placard, whether it be on a tree or on a post or on a rock, if we can place them.
Yeah, it's more the location than anything, so if there's a tree right there, then that would, usually we're okay with that, right?
Yeah, we've had applicants do fences, trees, stakes.
Okay, great.
Rocks too, so whatever works.
Yeah, the only lots that seem kind of difficult to do that on the lot line are 2 and 3, I would think, just because those buffer lines are so close to the home.
Mm-hmm.
It almost needs maybe a different treatment.
Yeah, and in our typical planting plan, I'm happy to, incorporate plantings along that buffer where it fits and it's appropriate on, both Lot 2 and Lot 3.
Thanks. Other questions, comments?
I have one if that's okay.
Go ahead.
I think you guys were able to address a lot of the staff memo comments. And the one thing that, just reviewing it earlier today, I noticed that I was a little confused about is the placement of the silt fencing for the, I think, erosion and control plan. I was wondering why it's not kind of one contiguous line around the lower portion of the property. And oh, this is the wrong plan. It looked like it was kind of stilted in different sections and almost like a V at some points, if I can find it.
So that was an effort to actually have it work as an erosion control fence and not just a project limit fence.
Okay.
We're running into a lot of issues lately with contractors running a continuous stream of silt fence as almost a construction fence, and it encourages channelization if it's not perpendicular to the flow, and it goes with the flow, so it will hit the fence, and then it will just start following the fence and then find a place to blow out because too much is accumulating. So we were trying to emphasize the correct positioning of it and have it go along the contours of the existing grade while catching runoff from the proposed grade. So if we will take another look at it and make sure that that's achieving its goals, but that's the overall intent.
Okay, so the intent is kind of to like fill in one, then drop to the next, and then keep going down?
Right, yeah, just sectionalize it instead of having a
One
fence
lot.
to those different sections. It would just be installed in those sections, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Would you actually be mixing it up a little with other erosion, like silt socks and stuff like that?
Yeah, so, and we'll clarify our notes too. I think we had silt sock and silt fence on one plan, and then we had erosion control mix. Really, all three can be used almost interchangeably, except when you're close to a natural resource like a wetland. So we would basically leave that up to the contractor to choose what's best for the situation.
And if there's not other questions, I have at least one other question about, I noticed when you were describing what the porous pavement would look like, you said that you would actually be using a asphalt mix. So that would be in the layer, like instead of gravel, stone?
So it would be, it would be basically a reinforced gravel with an asphalt mix at the top. And that would have
Oh, okay.
not all the fines in it, so it'd still be porous, but it would be a little, just kind of a reinforced gravel.
Okay. I thought it was going to be in a lower level, but. Okay. And I just wanted to clarify too that you were going to, if you described it or not, going to do the grading. You were going to provide the grading?
The
information?
grading's on the plans.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you see it on the plan,
The proposed
the grading?
grading?
Yeah,
I think it's in the darker lines on the
okay.
topo.
All right, I'm good.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, it says that item 6 shows similar, if not same topography as existing conditions. But you'll see that we do have a 2 and 3 foot cut on the end of the properties, but in our last meeting and on the site walk, we actually raised that up 4 or 5 feet, especially on lot 5, with concerns that it was changing the grade too much. So we did bring that up to try to match existing grade more with the elevation of the house. So, and then we're trying not to have a really expensive driveway with a bunch of fill. So we are following the existing contours quite a bit with the driveway. But there are proposed contours all along the driveway and on each house lot.
So I guess the other question is, how much fill would you be bringing in? Do you know? You don't know yet.
I don't know. We haven't done it, but it to me, when we were going through it, it pretty much had a balance. We were filling a little bit for the driveway and cutting at the back of the houses, so.
Okay, thank you very much. So if there's no other questions from the commissioners, I'm not really sure what to do about the clearing with the driveway. I mean, if you guys have an idea of how much space you do need?
Yeah,
I mean, as shown. with the grading on the plans. That's the clearing limit at this time would be the driveway plus the proposed grading. And it, as we go through the planning board process, it may change slightly.
Sorry to interrupt, but will you just speak into the
Oh.
microphone?
yes.
They're just getting
Thank you.
words from
Really,
the back.
John should answer the question. I'm just
Yeah.
being a bully, but,
okay.
so yes, the proposed grading and the driveway are as shown on the plans. As we go through the planning board process, and this is fully designed out and then reviewed by your city's engineer and then gone through all of these approval processes, those might change slightly, but that is what we are proposing, based on the information that we have today, is the driveway as shown with the proposed grades. That is the limit of the disturbance.
The disturbance and the clearing.
Correct.
So I'm not sure we need to know, I mean, it's up to everybody else, but if we need to know exactly what you're cutting, so it's sort of just more how far, but.
Would it be worth it to know the square footage of driveway in, well, I guess we do know the square footage of driveway in the buffer, and then just have a note on the plan stating limits of clearing within the buffer are limited to that area, and the grading needed for the driveway?
Okay.
I don't know if that's something.
And
that
again, if
we
you could just
bring
give a
towards-
little, if it says, I don't know what it says off the top of my head, but we might need a little bit of wiggle room, not a lot, but just as we get through the engineer review, if we need, a couple more, 6 more inches for the swale or something like that, we may need but not, it will reasonably look like what you see before you. Is that fair?
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
The mic?
Sorry, I would just add that the hatched area and our impact measurement that's shown on the plan does take into account our proposed clearing limits, grading limits, all in that hatched area, so.
Okay. Yeah, it's just hard to, visualize, that within the limits of, what we're looking at and what you need and kind of, and then saying that you'll do it, but we know you'll do it, but there are
This is not the last
extenuating,
Review, yeah. we'll go through it.
extenuating
Yeah.
circumstances, so. All right, thank you. So anybody want to make a motion?
I will try. Feel free to add as you see needed. I will make a motion that we recommend approval for 0 Banfield Road with the conditions that there'll be a clear maintenance plan for the pervious surfaces, that wetland boundary markers will be clearly delineated along the boundary, that the size of the gardens and the locations will be defined and as per the applicant will be built in order to manage 95% of the impervious surface runoff. And that there will be a clear planting plan, which also will include some vegetated boundaries as markers for the wetland barriers, wetland buffers where appropriate on the lots. Anybody have anything else?
Do we say in our rules how many feet,
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was
between our placards? Is it like 25 or 50?
Let me check, I'm not sure if it's in the
I
rules,
feel like it's
but
been both, and it's like been
we've had a
dependent on the
standard that
property.
we've been using,
Yeah,
but it has kind of been dependent
Yeah.
on the type of site that we're working with.
I just think it's important here, especially because past that 100-foot boundary, there's still, meadowy, grassy area. And if they don't see that, I think a homeowner might assume that they can keep mowing past that and.
I mean, I think this is like an excellent opportunity to provide education to people so that they know, like, okay, we're going to be stewards of this property that has the privilege of being near a wetland. And I think it's really important that we have it in the deed, like they've suggested, in informational packets,
And visually.
prepared at closing, because then say someone does go and like cut a bunch of trees down, then when they come before us, we can say, well, look at the deed, and then also you've got these placards, and it's just more clear. So it's great to educate people first, but then like, I think we need all of those things.
Yeah, the visual too, I think.
And the visual, because when people go look at the property, they'll say, oh, what's that? And then they will be drawn to the attention. And it can be a positive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no
We don't have a
distance stipulated.
distance.
No.
Do we want to stipulate a distance, like roughly?
Yeah, well,
Like
we usually
30
do
feet or
50,
something?
but totally depends on the situation.
I don't know how, what's the width of these lots? Yeah, maybe 50 does that seem fine? It's hard to know without being out there.
You're saying markers every 50 feet
Yeah.
or on the 50-foot?
No, markers on the 100-foot,
Okay,
right?
every 50 feet.
Every 50 feet, roughly, and using whatever appropriate installation method they want to use.
I mean, it's worth just noting, right, that the 100-foot buffer line is like inches from the house in a couple cases.
Well, yeah, and that's what I think where Jess was saying, like the
Yeah.
plantings too.
Yeah. Like, we don't have any idea where kind of the mow line is gonna be established.
I mean, at least not past the 100-foot buffer, the mow line.
So this is tough because we have stipulations, but we also have a motion. Do we need to second and then
Yeah.
discuss the
Mm-hmm.
stipulations probably? So does
Anybody
anybody
have
want
any
to
other-
second that, knowing that we're going to discuss?
In
this?
second.
Okay. Thank you. So did you mention in your stipulations about the planting behind the houses? Because I know you had mentioned that earlier.
I did,
Okay.
yes, that
Right.
they have a
I thought you
planting
had-
plan, which includes
behind the houses.
plantings
Yeah, but we don't really
as
have.
appropriate to delineate vegetated barriers. Yeah.
So again, like along that 100-foot buffer line, yeah.
And you're distinguishing the prime wetland behind the houses?
Yes,
Not one in front? Okay.
that was my focus, yes.
And then I don't know if you said the stipulation about what you had just said, Talia, about including the information in the deed.
I did not, because the applicant had already stated they were doing that, but
Okay, so
that
we-
can be added if
Be just in
we
case.
want to, yes.
Yeah, it's a nice, good offer, and
Do you want to verbalize kind of what that would look like? I know they already did, but the applicant shall show,
yeah,
provide wetland education within the deed for each lot?
yeah, regarding the regulations and the requirements.
I think it was, they had said in the subdivision plan,
Yeah,
which
in the
is definitely
subdivision plan.
I think they offered in multiple places.
I know, they offered a
They
lot.
offered it in the deed and in the packet for new home buyers, and
Yeah,
anywhere else? Did I miss anywhere that you offered that information?
We said it would be on the subdivision plan,
Yep,
that we would have a lot exhibit plan, which would be basically a picture of the subdivision plan of their lot, showing that buffer, and the city pamphlet for education of wetlands.
right, within the new homeowner stuff, and then in the deed as well, did you mention that also?
Yes, the deed will make reference to the subdivision plan set, which will have the 100-foot buffer demarcated.
that's good,
Yeah.
great.
I could get that all.
Did you want it to be explicit in the deed or just the reference
think-
that?
To be clear, we're not going to record the city pamphlet in the deed. It would be referenced, and that would be in the new homeowner packet.
That'd be
Yeah.
rough.
It should definitely suffice for it to just be in the subdivision plan, because it has, yeah.
Okay, give it a-
Thank you.
Because that
We
moves with the
appreciate that.
house.
Because
Once
it will have, yeah, because any.
Once it
yeah.
sells, it'll,
Because if that deed is transferred to anyone else, then the subdivision plan is recorded in the registry along with everything else. So it's like, it is deeded. It's almost like a parking spot. Yeah.
So you had said, anybody want to add, any other stipulations that we're missing? You want to go over it, Kate, one more time? Just sort of.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Did you talk about the stamped, something stamped by the
Oh,
wetland
geez.
scientists?
I'm glad you
I
said
remember
that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
I think this might have been on the last staff memo too, and I noticed that Sam Hayden from Ambit, or Haley Ward, sorry, did have a note on the plan saying that Sam did delineate this, but we do need the stamp signed.
Yep, we'll have everything stamped and signed
One of
for the
them,
planning
yeah.
board submittal
Yeah, and if that could be done before going to planning board,
before, yep.
Yep, great.
Absolutely.
you good with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Fine with that.
Okay, so I got 5 stipulations. Maintenance plan for the pervious driveway. Wetland boundary markers delineated on the plans on the 100-foot prime wetland buffer every 50 feet for lots 1 through 5.
And in
Num-
the field,
and
on the
what?
plan and in the field?
Oh, yeah, well,
I
they,
don't know if that's assumed.
permanent wetland boundary markers, the stipulation comes as permanent wetland boundary markers installed before site work can commence, something along those lines, so it happens before,
Gotcha.
usually if there's a demo, but there's no demo in this case, so it'll happen before site work starts for a building permit. Let's see. I didn't get your third one, which was the 95% impervious.
I just said that the rain gardens will
Rain
be
gardens.
clearly delineated on the plans, and as per the applicant, will support managing 95% of the impervious surface runoff.
Okay. So have them sort of show the calculations for how that'll be. Okay. And then the education.
Plan.
Planting plan. Okay, there's 6. Planting plan. Then the education on the subdivision plan. City pamphlet given to homeowners, subdivision. Plan will be referenced in the deed, which happens automatically. Okay, and then the planting plan.
And I would
Just to confirm, the wetland markers will mark both wetlands, the ones to the front of the property and the back.
Yeah, they should, but I
Should,
was only
but-
thinking the back, but you're right, they should.
Prime.
Yeah, I was focused, but.
Well, because the property is in between 2 wetland buffers, I would like to ensure that they're both on the ones towards the front of the property and towards the back as well.
I'd agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense.
And I was going to propose adding clear maintenance plan, you said for the pervious area and the rain garden? I don't think you said and the rain garden.
Garden. Yeah, we could do that. It is outside the wetland buffers, but it would be good to know how it is infiltrating.
Yeah, or just a maintenance plan for the homeowners, somewhere in there.
For the homeowners.
Yeah.
That in the first one.
And that was sort of I think the intent for the driveway too. But
Okay.
I don't know what we're missing.
Okay, stamped.
Anything else? No? So you guys are okay with both the last edition and, okay, no other discussion? Go for a vote. All those in favor?
I think that,
Opposed?
I think I'm not, wait, am I not voting now?
Neither you nor Oliver just voted,
Oh, yeah.
so.
Yeah, he
Oh,
didn't.
sorry, we have a full board, don't
We
we?
have a full board,
We
so
have a full-
5 there are voting.
I was just
Yeah,
wanted
and
to make
Oliver.
sure.
Did we
Did
find-
you get everyone's hands? I know we did that fast.
That was
again.
unanimous, right?
I think it
Yeah,
was.
nobody's
Okay.
recusing.
Okay,
Right?
7-0.
Okay, I'm going to pass this over to the chair.
All right, next
Thank
on the
you.
agenda,
Thanks.
thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
is 15 Marjorie Street. Is anyone here to speak to that application?
Hello, my name is Timothy Huron with Huron Brothers Construction. I'm here with homeowner Matt Reichel. We are here again to propose our project on 15 Sylvester Street. 15 Marjorie, I'm sorry. Based off of our meeting last month, we took your suggestions to heart and really attempted to minimize the impact of the project on the wetlands. In doing so, we have decided to move our retaining wall roughly 40 feet closer to the house, excuse me, as well as reducing the amount of porous pavement that we were proposing to install. As you can see on the plans, we have also brought in a lot of natural plantings and are proposing to rewild everything with native seed. So as you can see, the majority of this property is within the 100-foot wetland buffer. It really reduces our options to maximize the usability of this lot. We are attempting to keep all of the proposed work as far away from the wetland buffer as possible, but as you can see, it is 95% within the wetland buffer zone. On this site plan here, you can see that we have delineated a silt sock, but not on there yet is the 25-foot NOMO buffer that we are prepared to install. Additionally, the project has been designed to preserve wetland function by retaining natural drainage patterns. The added benefit of moving our proposed retaining wall is that we are going to be able to let the yard drain much more naturally. It is also going to allow us to not be required to bring in roughly 150 yards of fill, because we will be maintaining roughly the elevation closest to the wetlands. And additionally, we do have in our packet here, we do have some erosion control plan along with the permeable pavement maintenance package. The permeable pavement is going to be the same pavement mix that DPW had approved last month with the 49 and 15 Marjorie Street right-of-way. I don't believe there are any other changes from our application from last month, so if you have any questions or concerns, I would be happy to answer them.
Can you show me where the retaining wall is on that
Absolutely.
plan? Can you take the microphone with you? Sorry, they're not gonna be able to hear you.
Sure. So previously, we had proposed the retaining wall to be within 5 feet of the wetland area, and our alteration has been to move it roughly 40 feet closer to the house to retain the patio, and in doing so, that does allow us to maintain the elevation of the property at the wetland, and we feel that that is much more of a feasible option, and it does allow us to keep the area as is rather than bringing in large amounts of fill.
Great, thank you. And one other question. What is the patio made out of?
So the patio currently would be proposed as a flagstone patio. That being said, we do have the roughly 800 square foot of driveway would be permeable pavement.
Sorry, so the driveway is permeable pavement and the
Patio would be
Patio.
flagstone, bluestone, I'm
And
sorry.
are the joints big enough for that to be considered
They
pervious
would
as
be,
well?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And then similarly, that was helpful actually to have you kind of narrate the drawing for us. there was a lot of conversation about the driveway last time and the orientation.
Certainly,
Has there been
yes.
any changes?
Yes, previously the driveway was 20 feet closer to the wetland, and as we were bringing that retaining wall closer to the house, we decided that we would minimize that driveway extending towards the buffer, or towards the wetland rather. So we have eliminated roughly a third of the proposed driveway.
So it still swoops around and goes in.
It does,
Side, but-
we have reduced it by a third.
I have one other question. The tree that you show in one of your elevation pictures next to the current deck, is that shown there, or?
We are hoping to maintain that tree. The
Okay.
only issue is that in previous conversations, DPW had mentioned that the original sewer pipe
Yeah,
runs
I
extremely
remember
close
that.
to that.
Okay, so if they don't have to do anything in that area, your goal is to try to keep that tree,
We would like
correct?
to, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And just to clarify the vegetation, and so now that the wall's moved all the way back, one question on that is, how high is that wall going to
It would
be?
be roughly 4 foot high.
4 feet going across, okay. Now that it's moved back, are you leaving pretty much the rest of the area and the buffer in front of that patio and everything
Yep.
else?
So in front of that patio, we would be planning to replant any of the disturbed areas with a native grass seed. And then inside of that 25 no-mow zone, that would be allowed to rewild naturally.
Okay, so you wouldn't mow it at all?
We would not be mowing past that 25-foot buffer zone, but there would be some light maintenance planned for the yard area.
For the yard area, so at the 25-foot?
Yes. Being that that is their only yard on property.
And I had questions about the dry well and porous pavement, I think. There wasn't an actual cross-section of the dry well, I don't think.
We do not have this in this packet, but would be able to provide it.
Okay, that would be great. And you talked about concrete or plastic. Is there a problem with you using the concrete instead?
I don't believe there is, but I would not be aware of a benefit over the plastic.
Just because we're kind of like, okay, putting a bunch of plastic in the ground is eventually going to be degrading at some point.
It does, but we all do drink out of plastic Nalgene bottles and such that we're not so concerned about leaching. We would be prepared to use concrete. We would be prepared to use concrete if that is required.
Yeah, and you mentioned an outlet on the dry well, that it would be good to see that in the plan.
Sure.
And
Yes, we
how,
can
and maybe
absolutely provide
in
that.
time so that the city staff can take a look at it to see what's
Absolutely.
going on. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion? Anybody?
I'll make a motion to approve 15 Marjorie Street. We're with some stipulations, but I don't know which one they are, so I need a little help.
I'll second it.
Okay.
I don't know all the stipulations, so we'll have to state them.
So
Crowdsourced.
I think one was you wanting to use concrete for the dry well
Yeah.
and
And show an outlet. on
show the outlet
plan.
location so the staff can review it before it goes to planning board. And then maybe placards at the 25-foot no-mow zone that the applicant has stated they would adhere to? Those are the only two I had.
Yeah. What's the interval for the placards? Any idea?
I mean, we did, is 50 feet too far apart on this one? I don't know. Hold on, let me go to a map.
50 feet would mean like one,
One?
maybe two.
I mean, I would say 2 or 3, space.
Yeah, like knowing that space, I think like no more than 3 would really be necessary in that area.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would say maybe 2 or 3 spaced
Evenly.
evenly.
The property frontage along that wetland is roughly 120 feet, if that makes things a little bit easier.
Oh,
for
So
yeah.
2 or 3, I think
2 or
is
3.
fine, yeah.
And did we say anything about the permeable pavement, like a maintenance plan for the
I think they
driveway?
had, did they have one in here?
Is it?
I believe that should be at the end of the packet
I
here.
apologize.
Yeah, there was a narrative, I think.
It's a
Not
written
sure.
plan.
I saw it.
Pavement maintenance plan, it's after the photograph of the side of the house.
Thank you.
Inspect the driveway, clean the surface,
I see that. Okay.
check drainage. Oh, we probably should add the dry well to that.
Drywall maintenance.
Yeah.
So add drywall maintenance to the maintenance plan.
Okay.
Look okay?
And did you need to say something about the paper street and
Yeah.
or something?
So there's a couple things that I'm thinking. They mentioned willingness not to mow past the 25-foot. I don't know if we want to memorialize that on the plan somewhere, so that we have it in writing. But additionally, the planting plan or the landscape plan showed the installation of new plants in the paper street, which is off the property. And I'll have to double check on this, but you might need to go before Trees and Greenery with the city in order
Okay.
to plant stuff in a public
That,
right of way.
if I do remember correctly, that change was based off of a recommendation from the board that we were to buffer that driveway from the wetland.
I think it's great. It's just
Yeah, oh yeah.
from
yeah.
I guess, city perspective, what,
I think you just technically need permission
Okay.
to plant there, so we'll have to figure that out before the building permit is issued. And,
Do we have details on the proposed fill?
Yeah, I mean, some of the staff memo recommendations, getting more information about the amount of fill being brought in. We know 150 was reduced in the last plan. Also, there's a requirement in the ordinance where if there's a net gain of impervious surface, you need to show how you're kind of mitigating that or offsetting it with the removal of the same amount of impervious surface. If that's not feasible, then you need to show a wetland buffer enhancement plan, which I think this landscape plan is sort of in lieu of that wetland buffer enhancement plan.
Additionally, Matt and Beth Reichel, they are also the owners of the abutting lot, and they're in preparation to enter into the process of joining those two lots, which would obviously greatly improve our our percentages there.
But that hasn't happened yet.
Has not yet. No.
Right, okay, so this application is just for this individual lot, so you can't consider future merging of lots to add in those open spaces.
We are happy to make that a stipulation of approval.
Making the merging of the lots,
No,
the stipulation?
pervious.
We would be happy to merge those lots if it were to appease the board.
I don't think it's so much
I don't think it's gonna
percentages. It's-
No.
Yeah.
I think it's more the other way around because it's more of a, it's a hat trick to, oh, we have a great percentage because we joined both lots. So I'd rather consider it as just this lot.
I don't even think it's the percentages, though. It's that, you know, the ordinance is saying to remove just the amount, the same amount of impervious that was put in.
Right.
Or a buffer enhancement plan, which I think the planting plan they've done here is, I think the path they're trying to take, and I think it's, we just have to decide if that's enough.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things mentioned here, the 25-foot no mowing and the seed mix, and the light maintenance from the 25 to 50 maybe isn't clearly delineated on this. But that could be something that's submitted to staff if you guys don't want to review that.
Question about the seed mix. You mentioned native grass. Are we talking grass for lawn or grass as in?
Being that that is the only lawn space on the property, that would be a more conventional lawn as in
And
terms of height, but it would be
behind the
with a native
25
grass
foot
mix. I'm sorry, what was that?
Behind the 25-foot buffer would, or in that 25-foot buffer would be,
So the plan would be that within the 25-foot buffer, that would be allowed to rewild naturally.
okay,
And then outside of that 25-foot buffer, within their property, that would be more of a usable lawn space with native grass mix.
thank you.
Okay, do you need an answer from the commission on that? Are we?
I think I'm okay with staff reviewing those pieces.
Okay.
That it's, are you suggesting, Kate, that it's delineated in the plan, that there's a no-mow at the 25 and limited from the 50? Is that what you were
Right,
just?
I think there's just no way to enforce it if we don't get it on the plan set.
Right,
And if it's just in the minutes, then
Right.
it's not gonna be something we can enforce when,
right,
Then we should add
Bill.
it.
right. So it should be a stipulation that's added to the plan, but I am comfortable with staff reviewing that that's added.
Okay.
They don't need to come back before us.
so landscape plan needs to include details on seed mix to be used, the maintenance of lawn area. Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah. For the stuff that needs to be on the plan, with notes on the plan, you mean?
Right, so notes on the
Yep.
plan delineating the 25-foot where the markers will be, the seed mix to be used, maintenance for the seed mix, and the type of seed mix. I don't know if people have a preference for that.
I mean, I don't. I mean, he's saying it's a native
Grass
seed mix, native grass mix.
Does it have to be a wetland? Conservation wildlife seed mix, that's what we
Conservation wildlife.
usually recommend.
Yeah, what we usually
Yeah.
recommend. Is there a reference that we can point to?
I
think
think the
there is.
last applicant that we suggested that to, there was, there's a local company out of Massachusetts that does specifically wetland plants and wetland buffer plants. So they have a couple different seed mixes specific to wetland buffers.
Yeah, I'd put that on there.
Okay. Okay.
Do you want to read out what you have?
I'll try, okay. First one is concrete dry well, instead of plastic, and we need a maintenance plan showing how this will be maintained for stormwater purposes. We also need the concrete dry well outlet shown on the plan set. Wetland boundary placards along the 25-foot buffer, 2 or 3 spaced evenly. And the landscape plan will need to include seed mix proposed, where it will go. I'm sorry, I'm having a brain fart. What was the other thing that I said earlier?
No mow at the 25.
Yeah, no more than 25 foot. on the plan.
The no-mow line. Okay.
Good to me. How does everybody feel about that? We ready for a vote? Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Are you recusing for the next one? Was the next one 60? Next on the agenda is 60 Pleasant Point Drive. Do you want to talk about this one again? Just about it being after the fact, just because now we have a full
Oh, yeah, you're right.
board before we start.
Sure.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
All right, good. Just as I know some of us weren't here last month, quick backstory. This application is coming before us as an after-the-fact permit. And there was a site walk back, geez, I want to say June, end of June, first week of July for this property that I think not a lot of people could make, but it's an after-the-fact permit. Sorry, I'm just introducing it as an after-the-fact permit. Oh, wow, much louder when I lean in. But we did a site walk first week of July, I believe, with at least 3 commission members, and then work session last month, for those of you who missed it last month. And now it's here before us as a full submitted application.
Thank you,
Thank
Kate. Members of the commission, my name's Tim Phoenix. I'm an attorney at Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts here in Portsmouth. I'm here on behalf of the owners and applicants. The technical owner is 120-0 Wild Rose Lane LLC, but the real humans who own the property and will be living there are John and Michelle Morris, who are with me in the front row over here. Also with us are members of the team, including Jay Obie and Chris Rice from TF Moran. You will hear from at least Jay shortly. I will try to be brief. Other members of our team include Eric Weinreb of Altus Engineering, who many of you probably know. Eric couldn't be here. He is traveling with his son to take him to college in Montana. And the last I heard, he was entering the Badlands in South Dakota, so we chose not to be here to grace us. Also with me is Roy Tilsley of Bernstein Schur. He's my co-counsel in this matter. I think I saw Ben Auger and Drew Wilson come in from Auger Building Company, who have been intimately involved with all things construction on the site. And Kirsten Fordham of Riverside Pickering is also in the front row. They built the shoreline protection that we're here to talk about tonight. I took the liberty of preparing and going to provide you some props, if you will. These things are things that I believe are part of the land use application, but were recently uploaded, so you may not have. I'm going to ask my co-counsel Roy to hand out these things just so you can see them. And they include, and this is just for sort of background information, he's going to give you, well, let me back up. The staff gave a staff memo that was issued, I think, last Friday on the 8th. We became aware of that on sometime on Sunday and have been working to respond to it, which we did, and the responsive memo was uploaded to the LU today. We also gave hard copies to Kate and Peter, but wasn't sure whether you had them, so I have hard copies to hand out to you along with these little prop issues, and Roy will hand those out now, and I'll just keep going. Just to
copies.
orient you to...
Yeah, we have copies of all the memo.
You do have the
responses.
memo? Okay. Yeah, just hand them, you can hand those plans, those are fine.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you. Have the response.
Kate, you're too quick for me
Oh,
here.
is this it right here?
I know you haven't had a lot of time to look at this, but and forgive me, I just didn't know if you'd have it, so I figured I'd be safe and have it. What I'm showing you here is just to give you, some of you, especially those of you who have not been involved in this to date, a little background on where we are and how we got here. I know some of you, I was on the site walk that several of you attended. I was not here at the work session that several of you attended, so some of you are more familiar with this from dealing with it than others. But on the easel here And I think it's important for you to know, as Roy's handing it out, this is just the site. And what's important is this is the shoreline of the Morris property. And that entire shoreline was the subject of the previous wetlands conditional use permit issued by the planning board, I believe with the Conservation Commission's recommendation for support back in late December 2023. Then in early 2024, we had the horrific storms that ravaged much of the seacoast and created or caused a great deal of damage. Thank you, Kate. I wasn't sure if that would be available, but so I'll point to that one. It's easier for everybody to see. So what this document shows is the entire shoreline. The area in green is what I'll call the soft shoreline that was approved by the planning board via conditional use permit in late 2023. And that's that all top right side of the property, and then down sort of in the middle of the yellow is another green area, and that is where there is a very, very large juniper that basically covers the slope of along the shoreline. That is approximately 51% of the shoreline total. So that CUP that was granted is not changing. Neither is the portions of the original CUP that have to do with the top of the slope where the red is to the house. The existing house is coming down. There's a swimming pool coming out. There's extensive invasive species being removed, et cetera. So the original CUP that was issued was based upon a plan prepared by a landscape architect. It was not, to the best of my knowledge, stamped. I'm not aware of it being vetted by anyone to determine whether or not it would be properly protective in all respects of the shoreline. But in any event, it was granted by the planning board, as I said, in late 2023. Then the storms happened, which created significant damage. You have submitted one memorandum and exhibits by me and one by TF Moran on July 30th that is our detailed submission with all of the backup documents, the history of dealing with the DES, et cetera. And they included, and I hope you've seen, the photographs that show the significant, what I call scouring or erosion of this area caused by those storms. After, once the original shoreline CUP was issued, TF Moran was hired because there was no stamped plan, which the DES requires, so they got involved to analyze the situation and deal with the DES permitting. I also want to just take a moment and just say on behalf of John and Michelle, they're what I call the innocent landowners. They bought this property, they just want to build a new home, protect their shoreline, and live there. They hired mostly local people to help them and represent them, and thought everything was going along swimmingly, ending, they thought, in May of this year when the wall was completed, and they were looking forward to the demolition of the old home, building a new home, and moving into it. Where this came forward was when the staff inspected the site. I believe it was in May. It was discovered that this area that's in yellow, which is about 49% of the total, was built with what we call the hard, we're calling it a hybrid living shoreline. And that is, for some, this is an image that you now have in front of you. I don't know if this has made it there, but where my pointer is pointing, that's where that juniper is. So this is just one side of it. This is the top right side of the yellow. And I just thought it was interesting, would help for some perspective. This lower line of rock and stone was already there. That's not part of this. The lighter colored stone is the hard armor that has been installed to be protective. The upper shoreline, the upper area of this slope has been planted with over 1,000 plants of various types to be in part a soft shoreline. What you see within the, what we call the riprap of this is the updated proposal that we're making that's going to be before the Conservation Commission. This is not exact at this point. This is just to give you an idea. But the idea is to further address concerns over what this looks like and how it operates, et cetera, by doing plantings within the revetment portion of this, what I'll call the hard armor portion of this that will grow over time. Jay will get into that in more detail. So you also now have our memo that we turned in today. Apologies for the timing of it, but as I said, we just learned of the staff memo on Sunday, so we've been working to respond to it. And I guess the way I would put it is we respectfully but strenuously disagree with the contents and the message of the staff memo, both with respect to the technical and environmental issues they raise. Jay will address those, but also with respect to the request for peer review. I'll just a couple more things I want to add, which are, one, how do we get here? As I said, the original CUP was issued in 12/21/23. It wasn't stamped, so TF Moran was hired to determine whether the original plan CUP was feasible. In other words, was it reasonable in my lawyer's terminology? Jay Obie and others at TF Moran got involved and dealt with DES and did a detailed analysis, which you'll hear about, and determined that the soft shoreline that was approved via the CUP was not feasible. It was not going to properly protect that area of the shoreline, and therefore they could not stamp it. So they worked with DES for the better portion of 2024, answering at least 2 requests for more information, RFMIs, and came up with the plan that's been now been built. So you might be asking, well, then, and how did this get built when there was a CUP already issued for something else? In late 2024, in November of 2024, the DES issued a permit for the plan with this hard armor in part on the lower part of that slope. That was, according to the copy I got, copied to the Conservation Commission. I didn't get a copy that had a plan attached, so I don't know if there was a plan attached to that. Going forward, the construction team, meaning Kirsten, who's here, and Drew on behalf of Auger Building Company, dealt with the building department, and part of our original submission has these, and I have copies if you want them, but they're important, and I'm not here today to talk about or take a position on who may have made mistakes or not, but I think it's important for you to know what happened and how this wall got built. And I'm going to read in part. Again, let me know if you want copies. They are part of what's already been submitted back in late July. There's an email from Kirsten Fordham. As I said, she's here, to the Building Inspection Department. I'll paraphrase it. It says, we'll be performing a shoreline stabilization at the noted address. Do you want us to file a permit for installing riprap? Question mark. Well, thanks for your help. And attached to that was the plan showing this hard armor. A couple of days later, Drew Wilson, who's also here, also sent emails to the building department, basically sending the same plan and asking similar questions and adding a question of whether or not hard stairs can be put in rather than wood, and that's these stairs right here. In response to that, an email was issued by Paul Garand to Drew and members of the city, including Shanti Wolf, Peter Britz, as well as Ben and Kirsten. And it says, good morning, Andrew. I've reviewed the project with Shanti and Peter Britz, planner, determining that the project will be considered shoreline stabilization / landscaping and will not require a building permit. Please post the NHDES permits as required and continue. And that message is what led to the wall, if the wall, what I'm going to call a wall, it's really a hybrid shoreline stabilization being built the way it is today. Admittedly, not the way it was originally permitted. We are asking merely for an amendment to that CUP for the portion of the area that was not built according to the original CUP. Everything else, as I mentioned, 50+% of the shoreline and the upper area is not changing as a result of any of this. So again, I want to repeat, I'm not taking a position over right, wrong, or what should have happened. I'm just saying that it was, if you will, innocent. They understood, the builders understood there was authority to go build this, so they built it. And it wasn't discovered until the city representatives, rightly so, came out in May and said, hey guys, this isn't what was approved by the CUP, so there's a problem, which is what brings us to you today. I only have two other points to make. One is that the plan that's here has now been approved or reviewed and supported by at least 3 experts. TF Moran, their representatives are here, Jay will speak to you, approved this and could not stamp the plan, so answered RFMIs and came up with a design based upon experience and the requirements to come up with a proposal that's now been built that would be properly feasible and properly protective of that shoreline. DES, which has authority for these kinds of things all over the state, ended up approving it. As a matter of fact, is my understanding indirectly that a member of DES, a man by the name of David Price, attended the site walk in May and commented that what was built was what DES wants or approves. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but knew and didn't seem to have a problem with it. And then additionally, we have hired Tom Ballestero. I don't know Tom personally, but by reputation and dealing with others on our team that do know him and have dealt with him, he's well-renowned in dealing with these shoreland issues. And I understand that he has worked with the city on numerous occasions as well. He's analyzed this as well and has opined, in our opinion, that what's been designed is reasonable, proper, and thus feasible, and something lesser would not be. And it's because of that, my final point is that peer review has been suggested or is being sought by the planning staff. I understand it. I don't deal with conditional use permit peer review very often, but I deal with it with everything else, and it's not particularly uncommon. But in this instance, we think it's unnecessary for 2 reasons. One is these 3 experts that we have that have already approved this. We know of no legal or environmental or technical basis that their opinions, particularly DES and Tom, would be subject to challenge. And then secondly, no one's fault, but I understand that the possibility of peer review was first raised as early as June. It was then raised specifically at the work session with the planning board in July. We are now 5 weeks past that, and Peter Britz, to his credit, has kept us abreast of his efforts. And the way I will put it, again, not intending to put words in his mouth, as of at least yesterday, my understanding was they had not identified anyone to perform the peer review. So when I couple that fact with the 3 experts we have that approve this, which required a stamp to stand behind it, we just don't see any need for the time, expense, and further delay of the peer review. I'll turn this over to Jay, but we do ask for the Concom support to go to the planning board to have the amendment to the CUP for what's been built there to be approved. There may be a question before I sit down.
Just for clarification, you're the one who wrote the memorandum, correct?
The memorandum that was submitted today?
Yes.
I wrote it in conjunction with Jay Obie, whose name is on it.
So can you just clarify for me, You're on page 2, the second paragraph down, where it talks about this project did not impact any wetlands as defined. And then it says the certified wetland scientists of record did not delineate any wetlands within the vicinity of the constructed hybrid living shoreline. That
Can't-
part feels unclear to me because you're sitting at the edge of a prime wetland, so I'm not sure what that language just isn't.
Yeah, fair question, and I'm
Yeah.
happy to say, no, I can't answer that question, but I have someone here who can. And with that, unless somebody has specific questions for me, I'll turn it over to Jay.
I
I
have
do
one-
have
Oh, go ahead.
I was hoping I would get none, but
just one question. Can you, in layman's term, tell us what you are expecting from us today? You've given us 10 minutes of legal. Can you now tell us what do you expect from us today?
what we expect from you today is to send this to the planning board with support for approval of a CUP for this shoreline stabilization as it has been built.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you say that you have, like, those emails that you're referencing showing, like, the chain of correspondence that maybe highlights the misunderstanding? And I guess, would you be able to share them?
I do, and
That
they
would-
are part of our original submission, but I have the chain of them they were Exhibit 5A in the submission, but I have a copy.
Even if I can just reference it and you said Exhibit 5A?
5A to my submission of
Oh,
July 3rd. I'll just give them to you now. Just-
okay. That's really helpful. I don't know if anybody else wants to look at this. I just don't understand.
You can pass them down.
Yeah.
Are there
Anything else
any
for me? I'll have,
further questions before we hear the next part?
and I'm here if you want me. I'll stand up again if you have a question for me. Jay?
Thanks.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Jay Obie. I'm the environmental scientist and certified wetland scientist that's been assisting with this hybrid living shoreline stabilization technique. Just to build on some of the elements that Tim was speaking to, you know, from my vantage point, since TFM became involved, especially more so in the last few months, we've seen a lot of confusion. There's been a lot of head scratching, et cetera. And that started right out of the gate when we first had a meeting with members of the planning department to discuss what was built out there. And during that meeting, when we discussed how what was constructed was a hybrid living shoreline approach, members of the planning department flat out said, "What? We've never heard of this hybrid approach." And we were really taken back by that and confused. And when we met with the members that joined us at the site walk, that's specifically the reason why I asked those who attended that site walk to raise their hand. Raise your hand to tell me if you've ever heard of a hybrid living shoreline. I wanted to make sure that you folks had some recognition of that piece. We were then told to come to a work group session, a work group meeting with you folks, and we did that. And we came prepared to help demonstrate to you folks how and why a hybrid living shoreline approach is necessary in this instance. We came to that meeting with a ton of information to speak to that, to speak to how it's justified in this area, and how DES, the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, was able to approve this approach as well. One of the things we heard during our first meeting with the planning department was they didn't know that DES would even would approve something like this. And so, again, that speaks to a lot of the confusion and maybe some of the misinformation that's been floating around over the years relative to stabilizing shorelines. We were taken back by the memo that came out on Friday, because it certainly appeared as though it was, I'll say this as professionally as possible, it certainly appeared as though the project had been mischaracterized, and mischaracterized in a way that made it seem like there was a really egregious, downright horrible environmental violation at this site. And I can tell you, as a former member of the Conservation Commission in the municipality that I live within, and being incredibly reliant on the information that we received from our planning department, if I picked that up and read that, I would be taken back. Because it says things along the lines of there's fill in wetlands, there's wetland impacts, we're not going to have any salt marsh migration, there's an impact on functions and values of resources. It really omits a lot of the key information that's in the CUP application and in the information that we provided in multiple meetings with the planning department. So we felt compelled to write that memo to you folks to help try to set the record straight so that you can look at this hopefully more objectively and see all the contributing factors that led to the construction of this hybrid living shoreline. So here we are. Yeah. I'm going to get there in a little bit in the presentation. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, just so everybody knows, to back up in time, T.F. Moran got involved in this in 2004, on or about the same time that the CUP was issued for the project, including the entire living shoreline. At that same time, Altus Engineering applied for a wetlands permit through New Hampshire DES. Later on in that process, DES issued a request for more information letter, and they asked the standard questions that they're typically looking for in any shoreline stabilization project. First and foremost, they're asking, does this site even warrant shoreline stabilization? They're asking all these critical things that are required by administrative rule. TFM was then tapped to assist with the development or to assist with responding to that RFMI letter. And that's when we arrived on the site and saw this. And we could see that the shoreline was clearly devastated by those 2024 January storm events. Storm events that had a tremendous amount of precipitation and also had a lot of storm surge and coincided with astronomically high tides. So if we can go to the next slide, please. And I haven't forgotten your question. I'll get there, okay? Yep. Our first approach is what happened? What is there? What happened? What was there? Next slide. One of the first things we want to do is look at what was there before. It was essentially a living shoreline before. Granted, a lot of that's invasive species there, but it was vegetated. It was a steep slope, and we want you to focus on that rock right there as a reference point. And go to the next slide. Boom. Lost a ton of real estate. Lost a lot of large area there. Significantly impacted. Next slide. You look closely here, even, there were some saplings in there with some decent, rather robust root systems. Even those were unable to hold back, to resist the erosion that occurred here. Next slide. And next slide. This image here nicely depicts the amount of real estate that was lost. Look how far that was cut back from looking at that post there. A lot. All right, next slide. So what happened is, of course, the water came in. There was a ton of water, precipitation, high tides, astronomical high tides. When that water receded, next slide, it scoured away at that shoreline. You can see the evidence of the energy there in the current, little riffles and such. Next slide. essentially that water raced across the foot of that slope and scoured away that area. Next slide, please. One of the reasons, of course, is because those slopes are so steep. You know, we're talking about, in some cases, a one-to-one slope, sometimes almost vertical in some places. Next slide. And of course, it was undercut in this manner here. Next slide. Through the DES permitting process, we're required to look at anticipated sea level rise. Will that have an impact on the site in the future? You bet it will. Next slide. We're going to use the guidance documents that are prescribed by DES, these here. Next slide. And just even looking out to the year 2050, we can see that there's going to be, by the models that are prescribed by DES, a 1.6 increase in sea level rise. So applying that to the highest astronomical tide elevation, that puts you in the year 2050 at elevation 7.47. In 29 datum, that's roughly 8.2, right? We're talking about the elevation, okay, at sea, okay? Next slide. Environmental concerns. Of course, we're going to look at that too. You know, what else do we have to take into consideration? Next slide. One of the things we're going to look at is what kind of habitats are present. Look at the New Hampshire Fish and Game Wildlife Action Plan. And it aligns with what our findings are. You know, it's predominantly developed barren lands, developed impervious areas. We're not talking about areas with, you know, not high functioning, high value vegetated buffer in this place here. Next slide. We look at salt marsh migration. This is one of the pieces in the memo that said that, you know, we have impeded the ability of the salt marsh to migrate. Looking at the SLAM model that you're familiar with, right? There is no opportunity for salt marsh migration here. It's because of the slopes. Next slide. Then we say, you know, what can we do? We look at the DES rules, and the rules have a hierarchy of practices where you can use a single technique, or in this case, a combination of techniques to stabilize the shoreline. Next slide. One of the guidance documents they point to is this guidance for considering the use of living shorelines by NOAA. Next slide. Which suggests in instances like this, some hard armor is required because the tidal energy here is just too great, as evidenced by the images you saw earlier. Next slide. Other documents we're using for references. The SAGE, System Approach to Geomorphic Engineering. Next slide. And of course, the New Hampshire Living Shoreline Site Suitability Assessment. Everybody familiar with this document here? It's a great resource. It's a great resource for municipalities and conservations to use to educate the public when they're coming before you to stabilize shorelines. It helps you better gauge what methods are the most effective. Next slide. And when you use this model and this tool, it's available online, next slide, and you look at the Site Suitability Index, it actually shows that the area where we've proposed the hybrid living shoreline by that model says it is not entirely suitable. The higher the number here, the darker the blue means the greater the suitability, the greater the likelihood and ease of installing a living shoreline. This model says it needs some form of hard armor. Next slide. And it does use the word hybrid shoreline stabilization approaches. It's a common term that's used, and it has been used for quite some time now. Next slide. One of the next things we're going to look at is, you know, could we somehow make it work? could we make an entirely green living shoreline that everybody wants? And we look at what would it take? You know, what do we got to do in terms of regrading? Because you can't do it on a really steep slope. And here, just grading, getting to a 10-to-1 slope, you can see that would cut back way back to where the residential dwelling is proposed today. Next slide. Even a 5-to-1 slope, which takes up a significant area of level usable space that the property owners have today. Next slide. Here are the hybrid living shoreline details. This is the solution that we came up with. Next slide. What we've done is a hybrid approach. We've cut the bank back from a 1-to-1 slope to a 1.5 to 1 slope, and put hard armor at the base in the form of toe stones and some riprap, and then vegetated the upper 50% of the bank. In our conversations, recent conversations with the planning department and in working with Tom Ballestero, we are also going to incorporate something called a vegetated riprap. We're going to go back to the site and infuse the riprap areas with sand, and that's done so by washing it in with water, filling in all those little void spaces, and then we're going to vegetate those areas as well. Another thing that we plan to do is remove, where we can in some areas, some riprap areas to create planting pockets to plant additional vegetation in the form of junipers. When we designed this, the common juniper there, we intentionally did that because we've been involved with a number of living shoreline and shoreline stabilization projects all the way up the Maine coast to Cape Porpoise as well. What we see time and time again is the sites that had junipers on them were super, super resilient to erosion. So we're going to use those here, and the hope is with time those junipers will mature and they'll grow and they'll drape over the grayer, harder areas of the hybrid living shoreline. What this image also does is it projects where, in using that vulnerability assessment that I spoke to earlier in terms of assessing how sea level rise will impact the project, this nicely shows you where in 2050 that highest astronomical tide will be. The second line above it takes into consideration the highest astronomical tide in 2050 plus 2 feet of storm surge. The riprap goes today just above, a few feet above the highest astronomical tide line, and could handle storm events today. Next slide. One of the other things we do when we design this hybrid living shoreline is we have to make sure that we're not going to have an adverse impact on abutting properties. There's always a concern, you know, when you start using hard armor of any sort, you're going to interfere with the hydraulics of the area, maybe accelerate water flows to abutting properties. The prescribed approach in these instances is to do what we've done here on the left, is you key in the toe stones on a 30-degree angle. So when the tide is coming in this way towards the west, it's better able to dissipate that energy. Next slide. You can see to the left there the green arrow where it's been keyed around like that to dissipate that energy. Now, I can use this slide to help answer questions about wetlands. So you had a question about how could there not be a wetland down there. In terms of wetlands, the area below the highest observable tide line here is not a wetland. It's not a wetland by the true sense of the term wetland. The wetland scientist on record did not delineate any wetland. And when you read the memo that was sent to you, one could easily view that and say, this project is impacting wetlands and has fill in wetlands. You know, that's overly alarming. It's not a wetland in the true sense of the term. It's an intertidal area. Is it a valuable resource area? Yeah, but it's a rocky, cobbly beach area. Is there some fill in that area? Yes, 39 square feet. When they installed this hybrid living shoreline and put the toe stones in, there are a couple areas where the toe stones extend over the HOTL just subtly. But there are no wetland impacts. There's not massive fill in wetlands. It's not an environmental catastrophe. In terms of functions and values, no wetlands have been impacted. In fact, when this project is said and done, and the hybrid living shoreline is able to mature and become established, from an environmental science standpoint and from a functions and values standpoint, it actually enhances the functions and values here because of all the invasive species that were removed. Tons of invasive species all through this area here, all removed and replanted with native vegetation. Next slide. Again, this image here nicely demonstrates there are no wetlands in there. The wetland scientist on record, his name escapes me, did not delineate any wetlands in there. And you know, from a scientific standpoint, environmental standpoint, this is not a major impact on the environment. We're working in an area that's a developed area, has been developed for quite some time. The next image, I think, nicely demonstrates what the site will look like after we incorporate the vegetated riprap. If you could go back to that. So, in conclusion, I think it's important for everybody to remember that, as Tim mentioned earlier, you know, this is not a project that was done in bad faith. TFM became involved. We helped design a hybrid shoreline stabilization that will work well into the future. We since hired a third party, Tom Ballestero, to take a look at this as well. He visited me on the site with the site walk. He reviewed the plans that we prepared and that were approved by DES. And we asked him, I said, is this site suitable for an entirely green, soft living shoreline? And the answer is no, it is not feasible. And that's in the memo that Tom wrote, third-party review, that's within your CUP application documents. We also asked Tom Ballestero to assess what was constructed to ensure that it would not have any adverse impact on the abutting properties. And he actually kind of joked because our engineers are former students of his, and he said something to the effect of, well, you know, the ink's still wet on their grade. He reviewed the site, and he said, yeah, this project will have no impact on the abutting property. So to answer Stuart's question also about, you know, what are we looking for from you? We're looking for you to look at this objectively, to take our memo into consideration, to look at the facts of the matter and recognize that at the end of when this site matures, especially after the use of the vegetated riprap, from an environmental standpoint, there's no threat or harm. A totally green living shoreline is not feasible here. We're asking you to recognize that. And we're asking you to work with us on this. And we're eager to make this work, and this is not something we're just putting on paper. I'd like to see this through from an environmental standpoint and make sure that this vegetated riprap piece works as well. So with that, I'll take any questions if you have any.
I think Jessica had a question probably a long time ago.
No, he
answered it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess in Article 10, if you look at 10.10.13, it defines what a wetland is in the city of Portsmouth, and it actually lists out all of the bodies of water that are included in what is determined to be a wetland. So I have a really hard time, I'm listening to you and I hear all of the all of the information you're sharing, but it is within the wetland buffer
It's-
scientifically and in our written documents. And so I guess it's really hard to hear you
I guess,
stand
mean,
there and
perha-
say that.
Perhaps you missed my point. We're saying that from a Conservation Commission standpoint, when you review the memo, it appears as though that, there are significant impacts to wetlands and fill in wetlands. And when you look at the true definition of a wetland, as pointed to in your definitions, which is defined within the federal manual, these areas aren't wetlands down here.
That's not true, but I'm not going to argue with you. I'm reading it actively. So
Okay.
you're not helping your
All right.
cause right now.
You're welcome to your opinion. Thanks.
See, do you mind if I jump in? Because I actually have to leave, but I think there are two separate issues here. One is the legalese. Is it a scientifically defined wetland, or is it a wetland as defined in the City of Portsmouth regulations? I don't want to statute on the legalese. From the environmental side, is this the right thing that should have been done to prevent erosion? I believe it is. But we do have the issue that this is not what was originally agreed. And I think we have to separate those two. And the Conservation Commission is not the body to discuss the legal part, but is here to discuss the environmental value of what has been done and to protect the environmental values and benefits of this piece of land and in general wetlands as defined in Portsmouth City regulations.
Understood. And we're not trying to make a statement that there are no wetlands here and therefore that, there's nothing to see here. We're just saying from a technical standpoint, that is not a wetland. And even when you use the guidance documents in your ordinance to assess the wetland functions and values, right, which is the highway methodology workbook, you can't use that here. It's not applicable. You can't, those functions and values really aren't applicable. Maybe a couple of them in terms of, right?
There's a lot of functions and values.
Right, a couple aesthetics, but when you start getting into the true, a lot of functions and values of wetlands, sediment control and sediment trapping and treating stormwater. I mean, those are functions and values typical of a wetland. We don't think we'd want to get into the yeah. We, again, we don't want to make it appear as though we're saying it's not a wetland and therefore this isn't a big issue. There's nothing to see here. We're just saying from a technical standpoint, it's not a wetland. And
I think
we're going to remove the 39 square feet that do extend over the highest observable tide line.
maybe there's there's a few things that maybe you could just clarify in what you presented. So that 39 square feet was one of them. Could you just, where did you get that number and where are you planning to remove rocks from specifically?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. I'm sorry I didn't provide much clarity on that.
I mean, that's what you're having us permit, right, is
Yeah,
the plans?
yeah,
And
that's a,
if you could just kind of, this is meant to be a dialogue, so just
yeah,
give us a little bit of space too.
sure. Thanks.
Do you want to go to the plan set?
We had an as-built that was performed by the licensed land surveyor, and we found out that some of those toe stones extended over the highest observable tide line a bit. It turns out there's a foot here, maybe 2 feet here. They do encroach over that HOTL. And so there has been some discussions about, possibly taking those pieces of the rock off. It'd be essentially some drilling a couple holes and chipping off those sections so that we could say that the entirety of the hybrid living shoreline would be constructed within uplands beyond the limits of the HOTL.
So you're proposing to remove some of the rocks from the very lowest layer?
We would just chip off or shave off some of the front of a couple of them where it does extend. Actually, the furthest point to the left, I believe, is one of the areas where it extends over just a little bit. So they would drill some holes in, shave it off, then completely get it out of that area.
That's not gonna help with the planting, though. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I'm Ben Auger. I'm the general contractor. I've been a contractor for 40 years. We probably have 6 or 7 different projects going on here in Portsmouth. I just wanted to explain again the part of how we got here, to your question, how the stone ended up over the hot line. There are a couple of sections. It's actually the very left part of that photograph where there's a massive juniper which has stabilized the shoreline. But on either side, the bank was, as Jay's photos showed, it wasn't just vertical, it was undercut. So when we put the toe stones against the bank, they also overlap the hot line, right? So when you put the stone against the bank, it's also over the hot line. We didn't realize that at the time, but that's the 39 square feet. There's that stone, the stone furthest to the left, and then just on the other side of that massive juniper, it's the same situation.
Okay.
So I just wanted to explain how that happened.
It's this stone here.
Yep, that stone right there. And when you put it against the bank, it's also over the line.
Okay. So I guess you're proposing to
Thank
do,
you.
it sounds like a few different things. A little bit of shaving, and then, but I also heard that there's some planting and some rearranging of rocks a little bit.
Right, so like that stone, we can split that in place up to the hot line. And then, the riprap above it has spaces in between that, as Jay explained, we can wash sand in it so that plants have something to grow in. But just above it, there are literally 1,000 plants. I don't know if it's a third of them or a quarter of them are juniper already, which are going to grow down over that anyway, just like the one to the left, which has been there for, 30 years or 40 years or something.
Just one more point of clarification is, this whole area will be infilled with sand and then planted with vegetation, beach pea, bristly gooseberry, I think, and some raspberry plants that like to grow in sandy soils. And we've also shown on our revised plan that you folks have is that within in a pattern like this here, these larger stones in that pattern will be removed and a larger planting pocket will be created and then infilled with a juniper. That's the plan to make it the vegetated riprap.
How many junipers do you think you'll add?
I don't have that number with me, but it was probably a good at least 40, just off the top of my head.
Into that rock zone?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you mind just flipping back to the cross-section that you shared in your slide deck?
Sure, maybe Kate can do that, yeah.
Oh, great. There you go. So where within the transect or the cross-section there?
Generally in this area right here, they hand remove rocks and create a planting pocket.
That a juniper could kind of survive there in amongst the rocks.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to pause real quick. We
Yeah,
need to
for
make
sure.
a motion to extend the
Oh,
meeting
right.
time to 6:30. How are people feeling about that?
That's fine. I can stay.
Okay, can someone make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we extend the meeting beyond 6 o'clock.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, carry on, Lynn.
Yeah, that's helpful. So hand removing rocks and shaving some other rocks or that one rock, and then where will you put the extra rock? I guess I'm just
Yeah.
thinking
No,
through
that-
this is such a tricky thing, right? I think we all have
Yeah.
kind of something we want to say to you, and I think you should kind of give us all a little bit of space to talk. But there's
No,
also
I think
the
it's
the
great, yeah.
mechanics.
I'm sorry if I came across as being a little frustrated, but it,
Yeah, it was a little bit of a repeat of what we've heard before, that's all.
Sure.
So anyways, I think there's like some comments that we should each be able to just kind of share with you, just to
So,
sort of
and
kind
so
of-
in terms of the excess rocks, in terms of logistics and what and how that happens, I'm not entirely sure. Kirsten from Riverside may be able to provide some feedback on that. I would imagine that. Well, I know that we don't want to be mucking around down by the water's edge. in that,
exactly.
You know,
That's what I'm thoughtful about.
in that intertidal zone. We don't want to bring a barge in. We don't want to, you know, get in there and start really harming that, you know, obviously harming that area because it is valuable. So maybe Kirsten can provide a little more insight on that.
Hi, I'm Kirsten with Riverside. If we can hand remove the rocks, we can remove them right from the site and take them back to one of our storage yards. They wouldn't stay on the property.
Just curious. Yeah, I think the point is just, yeah, like you said, just to not create more damage in the recover, you know, in this sort of mitigation process.
That's right.
Brian?
So I think I'm trying to understand something administratively. I think I'll use that word for now. I'm referring to page 2 of the memo. And so this is when someone comes to this body, there's been an application that we have to evaluate and then make our either recommendation or recommendation not to approve to the planning board. So I'm referring to that same second paragraph that Stuart spoke to. And it seems to indicate to me, I'm reading that exact same thing, does not delineate any wetlands within the vicinity, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is what do you think you need approval for? What do you think this application is trying to comply with that we have to evaluate if you don't believe that it's near or in or impacting a resource? Because I'm having a hard time.
I'm sorry. I think the way I phrase that and the way perhaps it's written, it may be confusing, and I apologize for that. We're not arguing that the project doesn't require a conditional use permit. It is clearly within the 100-foot tidal buffer zone. It's within 100 feet of the highest observable tide line. We're just saying from a technical wetland standpoint, it's an intertidal zone and not a wetland. And my thought was, especially as being a former member of a conservation commission, if I were to pick up that memo and read it, and I saw that there was fill in wetlands, to me, as a former Concom member, I'd be like, oh my God, there's fill in wetlands. And that's not necessarily the case. It's not filling, you know, high-functioning, high-value wetlands. It's an intertidal zone, a beachy area, rocky area, gravel, cobblestone area. We know we need a CUP. We recognize that. It is our hope that now that you have all this information in front of you, that you will be able to recognize that constructing an entirely green, soft living shoreline in this area just isn't feasible. And in recognition that that the planning board has that discretion. I don't know the exact ordinance verbatim, but I think it says something effective to the greatest extent practicable. The first 25 feet, your vegetated buffer strip shall, you know, be vegetated and remain vegetated. In this instance, it's just not practicable. It's not going to provide long-term protection for this property. I'm sorry if this was maybe even redundant for those folks who listened to a lot of this information during that pseudo work group meeting we had a few weeks ago. Do you have any other?
Just to follow on, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to expedite this for all of us. So then there's a disagreement between what the applicant is saying, and maybe we've overcome this, versus what the memo is that's provided by the planning department, not to mention the fact that there's an email thread with the planning individual saying that they don't believe something was necessary. I'll leave that. So I guess I need to hear, I guess, Kate, from you all, you, Peter, possibly Deputy City Attorney McCourt, on what that means.
I think the city staff, at least in terms of definition of a wetland, we feel pretty strongly that tidal wetland is within our jurisdiction with the Conservation Commission, and that's defined by a highest observable tide line. And fill can be considered boulders, boulders can be considered fill. So if 39 square feet of boulders were placed below the highest observable tide line, according to our wetland ordinance and our definition of wetland, that would fall under fill in the wetland.
So do we need some sort of interpretation or delineation from the deputy city attorney? I don't know. It's not my place to know.
I think it's really moot because we're proposing to remove that material, and it's not going to have any bearing on the decision in terms of coming to the conclusion that a hybrid living shoreline approach is necessary in this instance.
Is there, like, should we make a motion at this point so that we can have
Yeah,
a discussion?
I was gonna say,
Because
is there any more questions directly for the applicant?
I have a question.
Yes, Kate.
Clarification. So what I heard from Mr. Phoenix earlier, when either Brian or Stuart asked, what are you looking for from us? It sounds like to get what was built permitted, not this vegetated infill, not the removal of the 39 square feet. Just want to clarify what your impacts are. As built or new proposal?
No, not as built. We don't want to retain that. We recognize that it was a goof up. These projects seldom go to, exactly as planned. I think if you were to take a hard look at any project that proposed shoreline stabilization, there would always be little subtle deviations. It wouldn't be in the exact footprint. So what we're going to be looking to do is to remove those areas that are over the highest observable tide line. Yeah, we are not seeking to retain those impacts.
And to implement this hybrid shoreline plan that you've been talking about.
Yes, yes, and that is part of the amended plan that you have as well. What we'll do is we'll just revise the plan to make it more clear, and we'll provide a work construction sequence narrative that speaks to how the boulders, some rocks or riprap will be removed, how those planting pockets will be created, how the toe stones will be shaved off so that there is no impact over the highest observable tide line.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any further questions? Would someone like to make a motion, if seeing none, to go into discussion?
I will make a recommendation for approval of the CUP at 60 Pleasant Point Drive, with the stipulations noted that, as the applicant said, the hybrid shoreline plan will be fully implemented and delineated, including the removal of the material within the highest observable tide line, as well as the additional plantings and the planting pockets to be created and the material that will be removed from the site in that process.
we have a second?
And second that.
Also, both you guys are voting for this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so discussion.
Want me to start?
Sure, Kate, please.
Just for our sake, so what is happening now is that the planning director, within his rights, has requested a third-party review of the original application and what is being proposed right here. So until that third-party review is complete, the planning department does not recommend that we move forward without that review to review. That's my piece.
Now, we still can move forward, but the third-party review would still happen, correct?
Right, if you'd like to recommend approval, and the third-party review has not been completed yet, and we haven't seen it, it'll be seen by the planning department and the planning board at the next stage.
Right, okay.
Because this does go to the planning board next. That's the typical process, right, for
Right.
conditional use permit?
Yeah. So I guess the discussion is approval with stipulations provided, or do we want to wait for the third-party review before we decide to move forward?
I have another question too, Kate. I mean, I agree there could be like differences of opinion in terms of like what would be the optimal stabilization sort of recommendation here. I'm just not totally sure how that changes the outcome. I mean, so what, if you do find somebody who says this could have been an entirely plant-based solution or something more creative, right? There's lots of other creative ways that are sort of in between gray and green. I mean, would we contemplate asking them to like rip out rock and put in, you know, tree stubs and root balls and, you know what I mean, like all that other stuff?
Right, so this is technically a violation, so
Yeah.
they're seeking an after-the-fact permit to get what was not permitted. So it's well within your rights to ask for what was earlier permitted, or for them to remove what was added before they go to vegetate. So if there's a third-party review that comes back that says, you know, this as-built or this proposed that we see here today is not the alternative with the least adverse impact, we can vote to either remove it or to do a different, ask for another alternative to be sought, either from this third party or from the applicants. And if we ultimately vote to change, either have him remove what was built or to change to something different that's not what we originally approved back in 2023, then they'll be required to likely go back to NHDES for an amended permit, just because it doesn't line up with what they originally got approved by them.
It's a pretty involved process. I guess the back of my head though is just like not wanting to do more damage. You know, pulling out, I actually don't know what was involved in placing the rock, but I'm assuming removing it is going to be a lot of heavy equipment and
But again, just by getting the third-party review doesn't mean that that's what we're gonna
I guess I'm
ultimately
just wondering,
decide.
do we wait, right?
Yeah, I
You know,
understand.
or do
Right. We don't
I mean,
necessarily.
I'm totally comfortable with, you know, the city staff doing what you feel is best, right? But whether you need us to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right, that third-party review will come back to the Conservation Commission.
Yeah.
It's really just, you know, getting a second opinion that's unbiased on their approach to make sure that we're all comfortable that what they're stating about their proposed project is the most vetted opportunity and alternative.
I stated at the work session that, and that's what I'm gonna stand by today, is that I was in favor of seeing the third-party review before moving forward, but that was my opinion. And again, at the last meeting, it was only Oliver and I here, and Jess was in the sky. But, so it's nice to have more commissioners to get feedback on how they feel they'd wanna go. But that's what I'm gonna stick to in this, is waiting for the third-party review.
And what, I didn't understand, what was the status of getting such review? It didn't sound like there was a timeline or,
Sure, so we have started talking to a specific set of contractors, and they're reworking the scope, and we're gonna be meeting with them in the next few days to finalize it and then get a contract signed.
And I think you had said the timeline might be the next month,
Right,
Commission? If they can,
If we can
Potentially.
get them to sign the contract and get going soon, hopefully we can get that by the next month's.
They thought that they could potentially get us that view.
That's what we're hoping for.
I guess you'll know.
As
in
soon
the
as
next
we
couple
sign the
days.
contract, then we'll know the timeline, but we haven't signed the contract yet. But it'd be great if we could get it done by that first week of September for our review.
Okay, thanks.
What are everyone else's thoughts on? Oh, Peter's coming to speak. Oh, we have a lot of people.
Since Kate hasn't been dealing with the contract, I just thought I'd let you know that we are actively speaking with a contractor to do that work, and we're asking that they get the work done the first week of September, so you'd have it in time for your next meeting. So if you wanted to see that independent review, then you'd have it in time. But under the zoning ordinance, I have the authority to ask for that third-party review, just like we do with an independent wetland scientist and other projects. And I think it's necessary just so we have an opinion that isn't, that's from our independent review standpoint. But just so, that's the update on where the status is.
And I saw Deputy City Attorney McCourt approach.
Please.
Was there something that you wanted to share with us?
I did, thank you. First, I don't know if Kevin's listening, but if we could turn the volume up, it's kind of hard to hear you guys on the speakers. So I'm just wanted to
Sorry, I don't know how to do that.
flag that.
Just lean closer.
Maybe if you could lean
We'll
closer.
move closer.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's
thank you.
probably just being farther. Sorry about that.
I appreciate it. And I just wanted to provide, I think Peter covered the contract piece, like he said, that's we're actively negotiating that. And I just want to clarify first that the motion on the table is to recommend approval up to the planning board. That's the active motion on the table. And my recommendation to you is to view this application that is before you, on its merits, given everything that's happened. If you can consider everything that's come up here, but really you're considering this application on its merits pursuant to the criteria set forth in the zoning ordinance. I'm sure you all know that, but I just feel it's important to reiterate that now. And on the last point that Member Gibb was mentioning earlier, the buffer in this area, I understand there are technical arguments about what is and what is not a wetland under other regulations, but in Portsmouth, the buffer is measured in this area from the highest observable tide line. Just to make that very clear, that's what the ordinance says. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I will just throw in while we're talking, I would tend to agree with you. My preference in hearing all that would be that we're able to see that we wait until that report comes back and that we do get to see it.
Yeah. Because if that's how the majority of us feel, we will need to change the motion or
Withdraw or vote.
Withdraw
withdraw the motion and,
Or vote on the motion
Okay.
and then make a new motion.
okay.
Whatever's preference, if you're willing to withdraw. If not, that's understandable.
Nope, I can withdraw my motion. That's
I think
our
Lynn's-
purpose
Lynn's
of
seconded.
discussion, so.
Are we in the agreement that we want to wait, or what are,
I don't disagree with that. I feel like this is just very hard. I mean, I appreciate Lynn's point in that if the third party feels we should go a different way, and then we're getting into removing things, and what does that involve? And I do feel for the homeowners, it's just unfortunate, I feel like, that this is where we're at.
I think we can also, when we're putting together the scope for the third party, ask them, what are the implications of removal? If that will give us some guidance too. I don't.
Yeah. Like what are
Because
some of those hybrid options that could be?
It's like, what are all of our questions and, different scenarios do we want them to look at
Right.
that would make us feel good about moving forward with either this as proposed, this hybrid plan, or, you know, some modifications that could be made, you know, whatever.
Like, what's the greatest good with what is now? What, this has happened, so how can we, like, make
Yeah, like
the best choice,
that could be
not
a
just what
scenario.
would have been the best?
Yeah,
Right, yeah, there's sort of two different questions.
right,
Yeah.
and that's something we can request in our scope to the contractor that we have do our third-party review.
Yeah.
And that's, to be clear, that's why I'm thinking that, I mean, if we do move this forward, it's going to go to the planning group and the planning board, and they are going to hear what comes out of that report. They might as well benefit from our input into it, which is what we're here for.
Right, that's a good point. Yeah, and I do feel like there's like a bigger message here that I want to like say. I mean, and I guess just sort of for the team here, right? Like I recognize that there's an enormous amount of capacity that's being brought to bear for this one property, right? And I think we're all taking a little bit of like offense at some of the language that's being used, both around wetlands, around what's necessary, around functions and values. Like, this is a very unique piece of property that, you know, you're incredibly privileged to be able to like live and work on, and it affects public trust resources, right? It affects public waters. And there's a very close connection between our shoreline and our waters. And, you know, what we're seeing here, that natural course of erosion, that is a very healthy, normal process, right? Like, our shorelines are dynamic. They change. Our river courses change. Our tidal waters change. Our dune systems change. Our wetlands change. And that is a healthy, normal process. That sediment that comes off the land goes on to feed the other wetlands that exist around Little Harbor. You know, so, and the reason why we feel like the stabilization is necessary is because you're choosing to rebuild a home in the buffer area. Like, that is a choice that's being made here at great expense to the homeowners, as well as with significant cost to society. If you were willing to move out of the buffer completely, a little bit of erosion, a foot here and there, every 5 years, every 10 years, you lose a couple feet. That's a natural, you know what I mean? Like, this, it would be fine. Like, you could just let it be a natural shoreline that is dynamic. Like, that is the way natural systems work. So it's, I guess I just want to be clear here that when you're saying this is necessary, this is the only way forward, it has to be hybrid, that is a human construct here, because of the way you're choosing to live in this very unique, very privileged place on our, you know, here within our amazing Portsmouth ecosystem. So I don't know,
No, I think that was
I'll step off my soapbox here, but I just hadn't heard that like voiced yet
Yeah,
today.
I think that was very well articulated, Lynn.
Oh, yeah.
Are we ready to make a motion?
May I be heard before that happens?
Sure.
Thank you. Jay may have something to say. First, Lynn, thank you, maybe. I just want to reiterate that we feel very strongly that third-party review is not necessary. And while we believe that the planning director does have the authority under the ordinance to require it, it has to be reasonable and necessary. And again, I won't belabor it because we've said it. We've got 3 experts, and we don't think it's reasonable or necessary to get the third-party review. But to the extent that it's going to happen anyway, one of the issues that I have as an attorney for the Morrises is we have no clue what the scope of those services is. And we're not agreeing at this point to pay for it. We may agree to it, but we don't know who's been hired, what they're being hired for, or what the scope of the services is. And we think we should have the ability to have some say in that scope of services before they're hired. You may or may not agree, but that's the way we all know what they're going to be looking at and whether or not that's a reasonable thing for them to be doing, because there's a definition of peer review. And we don't know what the staff or this commission intends that definition is. To Ms. Viccaro's comments, I would just say, as a layperson, I understand the comments, I understand the environmental, but people have the right to protect their property. There are hard shorelines all over the state of New Hampshire, all over Portsmouth. They can throw a rock and hit them from this property. So to say that it's okay for their property to go away, I just don't think is a fair statement, because we don't know if it's going to be a foot or 100 feet, depending upon how many storms and when they are, et cetera. And again, tying that to 3 experts who have said that this is reasonable and does not create any environmental harms, we think that should carry the day. Jay may want to
Yeah.
add something.
I just have something really quick. I want to take a moment, and that is, thank you, Lynn. I understand where you're coming from too. Why not? It's a natural process. Why not just let it go? It has a benefit to the salt marsh. It replenishes them with nutrients. But at the end of the day, like Tim said, property owners, everybody has an interest on the coastline in protecting their assets, protecting their private property. And at the end of the day, that's why the New Hampshire Living Shoreline Suitability Study was conducted, because everybody, especially with projected sea level rise, everybody has an interest in protecting their properties. And so we want to look at it from a scientific standpoint, using best scientific and engineering practices to say, how can we best protect these properties? And if there is a mechanism to do it solely by way of green vegetation, then do it. And lastly, I also recognize that there is a bit of a fear of setting a precedent. That was expressed to us in our meetings with the planning department, a fear that other folks would want to do this too on their properties. But you have the tools in your tool belt to say, and allow folks to be able to come before you and demonstrate when it really is justified. The New Hampshire DES wetland rules are structured that way, and perhaps that's something that you folks look forward to in the future to incorporate it into your ordinance too. And that's all I have. And I really thank you for your time. Sorry if I was a little frustrated earlier. Sorry to bore you with all the information for those who were here before. And I hope you all have a great night, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you up for one more speaker or no?
Well, this is discussion. I mean, we really need to make a motion. We also have to make a motion to extend, because it's 6:30. So I think we need to vote. Does anyone have any further discussion? Are we ready did we make a motion?
No,
So we withdrew a motion, so we need to make a new motion. Would someone like to make a new motion?
And make a motion to postpone till the next meeting. Is that what we're looking to do?
If that's
That or the third party.
review is
Until the third-party review is completed?
That's more appropriate.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, we'd like to make a motion to postpone until the third-party review is completed.
I'll second it.
Do we have further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Can we just clarify that that's expected before the next meeting and have a continuance of this to the next meeting? Because that's what we were told it would be ready by.
That was not the motion that was just made.
Right, the motion was open-ended. It could be a year for all we know. And I'm asking for this board to clarify that because the planning director said that the report is expected by the next meeting. And I think it's fair to us to expect that that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I don't think that's on the commission to clarify that. I think that is, with the planning department staff and our third party, we are trying hard to get this negotiated and in your hands soon. So we're trying our best to make that timely.
And I don't dispute that at all, Kate, but still, we would request that this be continued to the next hearing. If there's a problem with it from the point of view of the staff of the commission, we can deal with it. But if you don't schedule another meeting now, there's not going to be a meeting next month.
I mean, why would there be a meeting if we don't have the third-party review done? There's no point.
Right, and we've already made the motion on this, so I'm not sure if we can continue discussing.
Yeah, probably
Well, you can do what the commission decides to do. I mean, there's not typically, hearings are continued to a date certain. So that's what we're requesting.
I think we have to make a motion for the extension or
Yeah, we're past
something at this
6:30.
point.
Okay, so first let's make a motion to extend. If people are willing to, we still have just,
A work session, and then a request to postpone. And Lynn's board empowerment survey.
It can just be a minute.
Okay. great.
can people stay till 7?
For discussing 150 Portsmouth.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So is someone willing to make a motion to postpone to 7, and that's, I think that's
I will
calling
make a
it.
motion that we extend
Not postpone,
the meeting
extend.
until 7.
I second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay. All right, next on the agenda is the work session for 150 Portsmouth Boulevard. And just so you're aware, most likely, most people are gonna have to leave at 7, so I don't think we will be extending past 7.
That is quite all right. I will try and be incredibly brief so we can get to your comments and feedback
Okay.
quickly, and I'll get out of here. Good to go?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for staying late for us. We really appreciate you guys extending your meeting to hear us this evening. My name is Neil Hansen. I'm with Tyne Bond. We're the civil engineers for this project. We have a few other members of the project team here, Patrick Kermans and Ben Curcio, also from Tyne Bond, and Joe Gohekin and Kimmery Pauldrak, representing the applicant and ownership group. So this project is a multifamily housing project out at the end of Portsmouth Boulevard, where it terminates with Dunlin Way. This is in the recently created Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District zone out in the Commerce Way neighborhood. We're proposing 274 residential units in 3 buildings on what is now addressed as 150 Portsmouth Boulevard. We will be submitting a wetland conditional use permit application for this project. There are wetlands on the north side of Portsmouth Boulevard, which is the opposite side of the road from the project. So we have some wetland buffer impacts as part of this project due to that. So you got the site plan up on the screen here. So just to orient you a little bit for those of you who aren't familiar with the site, the Portsmouth Boulevard comes in from the left-hand side of this page. This is and then as the road loops around, that current section of road is barricaded off as a formerly connected through to Dunlin Way, and then Dunlin Way is down in the bottom right-hand corner of this plan, where that road currently terminates. So as part of this project, we will be essentially reconstructing this section of Portsmouth Boulevard to a city standard 24-foot travel lane. We also have parallel parking spaces on the south side of the road, which is the project side, along this stretch of roadway. All of the parking for the project will be on the main part of the site and outside of the wetland buffer. And we also have additional parking below Building C, which is the building on the right-hand side of the page here. On this plan, you can see the 100-foot wetland buffer line going through Building A. So roughly half or so of Building A is within that 100-foot buffer. Again, the wetland delineated is on the opposite side of the road. We did have a site walk last week that a couple members were able to attend. And you can see when you walk out there where that wetland north of the site comes really up close to the road. And as part of the packet that we had submitted, there was an old aerial overlay image that we had included that shows that where that wetland is situated was actually the location of a former housing building. And then where the 100-foot wetland buffer comes onto our site was also the location of some former housing units and parking areas. As far as the stormwater on the road, there's currently some old drainage infrastructure that we'll be replacing with offline deep sump catch basins, so we'll get some sediment removal from the runoff on the road. Currently, there's no curbing either on the road, so the runoff would just sheet flow directly into the wetlands, so we'll be adding curbing as well to kind of collect that runoff from having that direct discharge into those wetlands. And then finally, I just want to run through real quick. So right now, the existing impacts in the buffer include approximately 9,500 square feet of impervious surface. The proposed condition as currently drawn increases by another 9,300 square feet, which is mostly that Building A footprint area. And then a little bit of additional buffer impacts to reconstruct that road to a city standard width. So I will end my presentation there so we can get some comments and feedback from this group. We do plan on submitting our formal application at the end of September, so we would be hopefully back in front of this board in October with a formal application. So,
Thank
that's all I
you.
got. Thank you.
I'll start. So in your documents that you provided, you stated that there's 9,307 square feet new net impervious.
Correct.
So can you talk to us about kind of some of the offsets that you were thinking or brainstorming about?
What do you mean when you say offsets?
So in our ordinance, if you are adding new net impervious surface, there has to be like, I don't know the exact wording, but the removal, which in this case, there's nothing there.
Right.
So do you have any ideas of how you're gonna?
At this point, we don't. That's something
Okay.
we'd have to look into.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as any sort of like mitigation or buffer enhancement, it's really hard because everything's on the other side of the road. It's not on property we control. So we're sort of, our hands are tied there a little bit. But I think as far as maybe there's some option for some additional, I don't want to go as far as say stormwater treatment for the roadway, but additional pre-treatment that could be implemented. The roadway will ultimately be controlled by the city.
Mhm.
So that would be something we'd have to work through with DPW and city engineering on what they would want to see there. But I think there probably is some opportunity to do some sort of enhancement there, additional pre-treatment, something like that, where that roadway is currently just sheet flowing right into the wetland. But yeah, that is something we can look into further.
Is all the stormwater right now being treated then like slowly, ultimately being directed into the
In the existing
wetland?
condition?
No, in the proposed.
So in the proposed condition, so that big dark gray box is on-site detention. So all of the new impervious on-site will end up going into that detention system, and then that will outlet through some sort of treatment unit that is yet to be designed with some sort of outlet control structure. And then it will be discharged across the street. There's some existing outfalls there now that we'll have to look at and probably reconfigure because they're old and dilapidated, and they also, we don't believe actually have easement rights to discharge where they're currently located, so we'll have to work through that. And we did meet with TAC for a work session yesterday, so that was part of the discussion we had with them was looking into that further.
Yeah, sort of along those lines, but I think a little, I'm just curious because this plan looks like a lot of building and parking lot. And I don't see a ton of green space. I see some towards the far end of the parking lot with the meandering path and a seating observation area, but can you speak to sort of your thoughts or brainstorming around
Yeah.
green space for this piece?
So the way the topography of the site is that all of the existing level area is up along Portsmouth Boulevard, and there's a large flat area pretty much where the proposed buildings are going. And then as you get into the site, it pretty drastically slopes up. There's about a 30-foot grade change there to go up to the top of that hill. So per the ordinance, we also have to have the buildings along the roadway and the parking behind it. So that's where the buildings got pushed up to the right-of-way line. And then we wanted to keep the parking as close up to the buildings as possible to minimize that impact into the hillside as much as we could. That was also part of the reasoning for putting parking under Building C, was to also try and minimize that impact to the site and really try and limit the amount of impact to that hillside that we had to do to get everything to fit.
Thank you. Sorry I couldn't make the site walk.
Is there a reason why there's parking only under Building C and not the other two?
Yeah, so it has the way the grading of the road works is that the roadway from left to right on the plan goes from high to low, and so to get parkings under Building A or B, we would either lose a lot of area in the site to get a ramp down into the building outside the building, or we would use up most of the footprint with inside the building to get a ramp down to get parking. So the sort of ratio of ramp to parking doesn't make sense to get it under A and B. But the way the grading works, we're able to get the driveway entrance under building C on the sort of the south end there, and it's only like a half a floor. So we're able to utilize most of the footprint for parking under C, where under B and A, it's not as possible with the grading.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
So you've got, well, I had a couple of questions, but one is you've got 30 extra parking spaces than you're required, according to this.
Yes.
So is there, and I guess what I'm trying to get at is, you know, and it's nice that all these buildings are, you know, nice and uniform and right next to each other, and you've got the curve there. But building A is probably impacting the buffer the most. And I mean, is there any opportunity to give up some of the parking spaces behind it, move the building back a little bit so that it's not, I mean, I think it would be aesthetically better too, to not have
So
to wall.
the parking ratio we have is about as low as we want to go for market rental purposes. We are utilizing, there's a 20% reduction in the ordinance that we're utilizing for being within a quarter mile of public transit. So we already have 20% off the top of our parking total. And the owner and applicant also has control of the 75 Portsmouth Boulevard lot, which is an office building. So it's a good complementary use. If there's any overflow parking needs, there's a sidewalk that goes down to there, and so we would envision overflow parking for this parcel would be there. So we feel we're at about as low as we can go on the parking for the number of units that are proposed.
So the other side of that would be considering reducing the number of units? I mean, you're getting the extra floors, you know, you're really maximizing this space, which is great. I mean, the density is good, but in this case, it would make a big difference to be able to allow the buffer a little more space. So just to consider it. And then they're also across the street, or the non-existent street, is it now, they own that too?
Directly across the street, I don't believe so.
No?
I think it's owned by Eversource, right? Yeah, different ownership across the street.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, you can see from this plan, it's heavily wet across the street, so it's almost all wetland or wetland buffer over there.
Did you look at other configurations of the buildings versus parking to put the buildings on the back of the site and the parking?
So the parking has to be behind the buildings by zoning ordinance. To answer the first part of your question, yes, we looked at a dozen plus different configurations of buildings, parking. So it's there was many different iterations of this that we looked at.
I guess I kind of ask because I see that the back parking lot, the ones furthest away from the buildings, are 10 feet below existing grade when all is said and done. So it just almost seems like putting a parking layer and then
Yeah,
building
and
on
we
top
did
of
try
it.
and bring that up as high as we can without having any sort of structured parking. So actually between the second and third rows, there's a retaining wall there, so that where we basically from one row to the next have stepped up in elevation as much as we really can with drive aisle slopes and just to try and minimize that as much as we could.
Along those lines, there's some ideas about like the roofs being green roofs. And part of it is that the question about, there's not a lot of green space that Jess asked, and within the parking in the buildings and stuff. And I mean, I always think back of when we used to call it effective impervious surface, and if you break it up a little bit, or if you create opportunities for more infiltration, then there's going to be less runoff and there's going to be less contaminants coming off of the site. I know if you treat it, that helps tremendously, but if there's opportunities for it to infiltrate through the site on the site or on the roofs or whatever. And just having green space now, it just seems like with, you know, the heat that we're dealing with all the time, and it just kind of makes sense makes the property look more invitable, but
Yeah,
just to
and I know
consider.
the areas between all the buildings, we really haven't gotten into the really detailed design of those areas yet, but those are obviously be sort of main entry points, and so I think time will be spent trying to, you know, do what we can in those areas. And the other area that's still sort of, you know, it's blank on the plan, needs to be designed, is that area between the building facade and the street itself. Right now, it's just curb, sidewalk, and then we have the sort of undesigned to date space there that will need some thought put into it before we come back with a formal application.
I mean, I think there's a really good opportunity here for community space, especially because it's right next to Osprey. I know a ton of kids like play back in this space too. It's so close, and it's like a great wooded area right now. So clearly something's going to happen here, but community space, like it's a place where it would really get used if there was green space.
Like the trail that they're already putting in, is that going to be open to the public kind of thing?
Yeah, that's actually a good question.
I don't know.
So
that
we,
trail?
under the Gateway ordinance, or the Gateway neighborhood ordinance, we are utilizing the land transfer option in that to get the added density. So by ordinance, we don't need to dedicate formal community space for this project. With that being said, I don't think we are planning on restricting access to this hillside park area, for lack of a better definition. So it certainly would be, people would be able to walk onto the site and walk up the hill. And that wooded area up at the top where that high point is, you know, we hope that to be a really nice area to, you know, put a couple benches, seating area, that sort of thing. But yeah, it won't be formally public accessed area.
Go ahead, Oliver.
How many acres of tree clearing do you anticipate?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's a 7 or 8 acre parcel. Yeah. The bottom, now where the buildings are is pretty young growth scrub brush, so it's mostly just the hillside where the cutting is gonna need to occur for that grading to happen. Obviously, the planning plan we provided is still fairly schematic in nature, but the intent is to try and regrow that hill as best we can. There's also, I don't know if I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but there is pretty shallow ledge in most areas on this site. So as far as like naturally occurring infiltration, Barbara, to your point, is from a stormwater perspective, or stormwater treatment perspective, we can't claim that as stormwater treatment on the site due to the shallow groundwater. Although your point is well taken about the more green space you have, you get that sort of natural infiltration anyway. Same thing with that hillside. We're sort of showing it as a graded slope, but we, you know, when we get into it, it could end up being ledge, and it'll end up actually, if it is ledge, would limit that impact, because we'd end up with a more vertical face than a large sloped cut.
You good, Jess?
This is a little out of our purview, but for me, it kind of speaks a little bit to the mitigation. Has the developer, property owner considered like renewable energy or EV chargers or solar panels or any of those kinds of things to talk about how the buildings are going to be powered and heated and
I think at this point, it's likely a little bit early in the design process, but those are all things that are discussed through this design process, and if they make sense for the project, that, you know, it's stuff that does get pursued, but it has to make sense, and I just don't think it's to that point yet. But
when
they're all good
I
points.
would be curious just to hear sort of when you come for a formal application, what that thought process looked like and where you kind of landed and some of those things. Yeah.
Since this is a work session, I was going to say I wanted to say that it's nice that you've already thought of doing slanted curving rather than the straight up curving, which we seem to, on the other side of this development or the other area, the city had straight up. So I'm hoping that's okay because it's going to be a city road.
The city has allowed us to do it in other projects that are wetland buffer adjacent or in a wetland buffer, so I would think they'd be amenable to that on this project as well.
So, and I'm also wondering if there's opportunities on lighting for, especially in Building A, to make sure that there's not a lot of high lighting on the buildings and stuff, because you've got 6 stories. Also in the, working with the city on, you know, what the requirements are for the street lighting, and if there's opportunities to, at least in part of it, right near the wetland, to kind of keep it down. And then tree planting on the roadway. I know that's probably the city, but if you guys are planting trees in front of the buildings.
Yeah, it will be designed and built by the project, but it will have to be taken over by the city, so they'll obviously have to approve whatever goes there. Same thing with, I think, you know, anything in the right of way would have to go to trees and greenery as well. So that's something that we'll need to vet out through the design process, but yeah.
Any other comments?
I'm still thinking about the grade of the site. It's fun to see all the visualizations that you included in your packet. Thank you for those.
Yeah, that one with the different heights was
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, we got some good comments when we went to design review with the planning board. That was sort of the genesis of creating these. And I didn't speak about these much during or at all during the presentation, but just for reference, because these elevations are different than what's shown on the cross section on the next plan. These elevations are showing what the top of the tree canopy elevation is, and then the top of the roof elevations for the various buildings and locations. So these aren't ground surface elevations. And then when you go to the next page with the cross section, it's the same thing. It's the little bubbles are the tree canopy elevations. It's just, this is cut through not the highest part of the site, so that 140 elevation doesn't line up with the 170 on the page before. But we thought this was a good visual to show how this, you know, we also by pushing the buildings up to the roadway, we maintained a much larger buffer between the development and the neighbors to the south.
Mm-hmm. All right. And do you have to do some regrading of that hill? Or you can actually have to, in order to create that parking?
So you can kind of, where the heavy tree line sort of ends and starts, that's kind of the limit of the regrading, and everything to the right of that is existing, and everything to the left of that would be regraded and replanted.
So there will be a
Yes.
fair amount of kind of cutting into the slope for that. Okay, and that's why you have to physically create a little trail in order to kind of get up there after that. Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks like, and as you mentioned, there previously were buildings on site.
Yeah.
Have you run any type of phase 1 or similar just to analyze what is there and if people were dumping illegally or something to the effect?
I don't know if one has been done or not at this point.
Just curious.
Yeah, looking at those historical images, those were torn down sometime in the mid-90s. The image that was that we used was from 1992, and then I think the next available aerials from 98, and the buildings are gone. So it's somewhere in that range. And on this plan too, you can see the gray outline in the bottom left there of where the existing hotel is.
I'm curious about the land transfer that's happening. Could you tell us just a little bit more about that?
So,
Kimmery
Poldrack with the Kane Company.
Sorry, say it one more time when you're close to the mic.
Sorry, Kimmery Poldrack with the Kane Company. At this point, I'm still talking with the city attorneys and some city staff members, and that is not yet for anyone else's ears, I don't believe, until they give me that clearance, so I'm unable to say. But we're making great grounds with a transfer.
Okay. I'm just curious if would it involve purchasing more land and then giving it to the city, or is it land that's already within your
The way it works in the GNOD and in the settlement is that the land must be in the GNOD. So
in the
GNOD area, which is the Commerce Way, those properties owned by the Kane Company, it needs to be in that area that has now been the GNOD overlay placed
the
on
overlay
it.
district area. Okay.
Yeah.
That acronym I
Sorry.
haven't heard pronounced that way. Sorry.
In the essence of time, because we only have like 5 minutes and I know we need to postpone something and you have something, Lynn, is there any final comments we have? Yeah.
I just want to say, because it's a work session, you know, all of our questions and everything, I know you guys have come along really far already and have really thought this through, but just consider everything that we said, because I know you have answers for everything, but maybe there's something you haven't thought of within those, you know, the barriers to doing some of the things that we've talked about. And in addition to that, the fantasy would be to have two-story parking at least somewhere, it may be back towards the hill or something like that, where then you're allowed to bring things back. And that's, you know, you don't have to answer that, but just to think about it.
Yeah.
And see if there's a feasibility anywhere in there.
And that would mean moving Building A back.
Moving Building A back and having somewhere for the parking to be, like, not a garage, but at least two-story kind of thing, you know, sort of a garage. So, just to consider.
And incorporating a little bit of green space to make it as livable as possible for, you know, folks who live there. And then I think to Jessica's point too, you know, the energy efficiency stuff makes a big difference, and I'm sure you're going to have to be selling this project, and it's probably going to get a little pushback here and there. So the more you can pad it with those
Green
good things.
rooftops too,
Yeah.
you know, just all these things to, when you're going back and looking through things to put together your application to consider. So.
Yeah,
I
no,
guess-
we appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
I just would like to speak for the trees for a second. If there's any site work scenario that doesn't fully clear the back part of the lot, that, you know, maybe there's some stepping or something so that some of that existing terrain can remain. I would love to see something like that, but.
Yeah, and we are, it's certainly something we are thinking about through the design process, and we are doing everything we can to minimize what we need to take to the best we can. So we certainly don't want to take anything more than we need to, but appreciate the comment.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, let's do this fast. We have to do a request to postpone for the Beverly Hill Road and Greenleaf Avenue project. Would someone like to make a motion for that?
Make a motion to postpone the Beverly Hill Road and Greenleaf Avenue project till the next meeting.
Do you have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Great. And then Lynn, you have other business?
Yeah, I'll just say super quickly, you may have seen this in your email. I think Kate forwarded it, and you may have also gotten it from the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions. But it's I'm a part of a team. This is, again, my day job, my professional role. We're considering a few different ways to kind of support conservation commissions around kind of the New Hampshire Seacoast area. There had been kind of a workshop series, so there's, you know, sort of debating whether or not to kind of revitalize that could help kind of like create more connections across conservations, help fill sort of knowledge gaps, particularly among newer members, provide a chance for just some like extra learning. So this just a little invitation and a request to kind of take that survey and to just be really candid about what would be of interest to you. Would you actually want to come to like a little in-person regional meeting? Would you rather just review a quick little 5-minute video? Like what sort of things might help you kind of do your job better as conservation commissioners? I know I've got kind of a long list of things that I wish I was more informed about. So it's very much something that I'm excited to kind of pursue as both, you know, to benefit me, and I'm curious to see what other people feel about what would be helpful to you. Thanks. That's it.
Thanks for doing. Does anybody else have any other business? Brief other business. Okay, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.